Now the engine assembly. Well, the assembly, as always, I start with a block. The block is wasted, washed, that's even painted with what I'll show everything a little later. So, well, naturally I start assembling the engine with the installation of the crankshaft. So, before starting the assembly, I just want to demonstrate that the beds are all washed, wiped and degreased. That is, there is no dust, nothing. Also, notice, there is one insert, here it is. So the design is made in such a way that the liner ends, it looks a little bit behind the chamfer. That is, from these sides, as I told you in previous videos, no carbon deposits are collected, a plaque that can then lead to the fact that the insert will not sit in place and it will be skewed and the crankshaft will stick. But still these places need to be wiped. So, well, before inserting the inserts, I already inserted the insert here, I inserted it here it is an oil nozzle. I haven't inserted them here yet. That is, do not forget to insert them, otherwise you will not have oil pressure and will have to do everything all over again. So it's a block. Now in more detail. So, look, the injectors are. Well, this is how it looks like, something like a cartridge for a small pistol, so. There's a balloon inside. She has a spring there, that is, it works after a certain pressure and it is inserted into the bed, well, more precisely, not in the bed, but in its seat. That is, I want to draw your attention, there are no sealing rings here and there were none when I was disassembling, but this surface here, there's a little bit of carbon there, well, like carbon, a yellow coating here. It's so aluminum. That is, he is there tightly. That is, here he comes in and he's tight. That is, nothing gets crammed in there, but nevertheless, it stands there tightly. The inserts that should be here, or rather they already are usually Kolben Schmidt in the original here, but we took the NPR here. They are almost twice as cheap, but they are absolutely no worse in quality. I would also like to mention the design of the inserts. Here, the insert is already installed on one hook. Here it is. The inserts are made, have such a design that those with a groove are placed in the block, they have one locking tail, and those that are installed in the lid, they have two locking tails, that is, you can't confuse them here, that is, so as not to accidentally put one instead of the other. The same with the thrust surface. Instead of the thrust rings, here it is folded, that is, here it has two tails, which is placed in the lid, and here it has one locking tail, which is placed in the block itself. Also, to assemble the crankshaft, we will need two things. This is a synthetic transmission oil, but not only for the crankshaft, it generally collects the entire engine on it. I want to note, well, I use Nesta oil 75 to 90, please, full synthetic drive gear oil. Well, here he is. And of course the paste for assembling the crankshaft liquimally. This is probably the only thing I use on molybdenum with molybdenum. Here it is bridge 2. Good lubrication. Its advantage lies in the fact that when applying the lubricant they usually recommend applying just this lubricant to the liner and that's it. I also additionally wet everything else with transmission oil, well, through an oil can. That is, the plus of this case is that the engine after assembly can stand for even a year and the oil, well, the grease that is between the liner and the crankshaft, it will not drain anywhere and it will not squeeze out anywhere. Because the usual transmission is so assembled by the engine and according to the instructions, the engine is assembled, but after a while it drains, that is, or a couple of turns with the crankshaft did and there is already a very thin oil film remains. Also, an important point on fixing the hooks before installing them according to the instructions, that is, more precisely, this is what Krylov suggests, lubricate the tip of the thread with a little oil. I'm going to lubricate it now, while I'm putting everything on the crankshaft. All this extra oil will drain off the bolts. In order that when when tightening these threaded connections, so that the force with which you will pull the bolts, so that there is exactly the effort from wrapping, and not that plus friction, which spends so that it is not spent. Well, here it is smeared in these places, but I'm not very comfortable with one hand right now. It's just that usually this is roughly speaking the support surface, where the bolt contacts with its cap, too, so that there is no friction here. Well, I always put the crankshaft assembled. This is it after balancing, after the grease was applied on the crankshaft cover, that is, the lugs and the liners were lubricated in the block itself, you need to put the crankshaft. But the fact is that in the assembly, as I have already said, that I have inserted in the assembly, I will insert. It's basically heavy, so of course I can put it on, but we'll put it together with the father, because it's completely alone. Well, here they are all smeared with bugles, so, come on, sledge. So this is for you. Before installation, of course, the crankshaft needs to be blown, cleaned. Dad is still lying Bobbick. So, everyone, now look here, the crankshaft is installed, right? After that, I take my transmission oil, well, from the oil can. And not much, I wet these surfaces a little. That is, you don't need to throw a lot here, so as not to get into the thread in the block. By the way, I forgot to tell you when I showed the mounting bolts. I lubricate the mounting bolts with oil, namely the thread, and they should be dry in the block. Therefore, there is no need to add a lot of oil here. It is in principle, that is, as Liquimile suggests, that is, it is generally not necessary here, but nevertheless it is necessary to lubricate. Now you can install the hooks themselves. I want to note that the bugle should be visible right here. 1, 2. It was me who cut them with my cores, because the fact is that they are not here. At least when I was sorting it out, I didn't see any normal designations for this case, that is, so that they were clearly marked. Therefore, I cursed myself, and again, that is, the installation of these covers here, they are the same hooks, the lock to the lock on the block is put. Here it is once. Here it is too. Also, some of them do not always fall into place the first time. I have a copper pig like this, and I'm egging it on. But these, in principle, have become normal, but no, wait a second, here, that is, here it is necessary to invite them a little like that. After that, the bolts are installed. Here are the hats, I have oiled them and the thread. Here, all the glass is superfluous and everything is spinning. Now the bed is tightened with a torque wrench with an effort of 8 kg for this thread, for M10, as a rule, in such they are basically all the same, that is, somewhere in the region of 8 kg, it is all delayed. Well, I've already tightened the central one. By the way, after each puff, I want to draw your attention, that is, check the crankshaft so that it does not stick. Well, that is now. That is, not to immediately involve him. Here he clicked, well, twist it. That's fine. And so everything drags on. I want to note that, for example, on Lada cars, well, Boz Classics, the effort to tighten is about 8 and 4 kg, but there is a smaller thread 125. In general, they are somewhere 8 stretch any M10 in cast iron, come on. Here he is, the crankshaft is rotating, nothing prevents him. That is, by tightening, I want to definitely focus on the fact that 8 kilograms, that is, even if it seems like a lever by force, well, it is a lever by hand, that is, that it is not necessary to overstrain in any case. That is, this effort is quite enough not to break the bolts, not to deform the bed, and so that the system works reliably and correctly in its mode. And now in more detail about the crankshaft. So, as I have already said, it is convenient for me to simply put it in the assembly after balancing, that is, a minimum of effort is spent on this later. That is, roughly speaking, the flywheel was removed, put the lid on, assembled. Same thing in front. I removed the pulley, put it on, assembled it. So look, here's the balancing. Here they can be seen fresh traces from drilling once, drilling twice. This is about the crankshaft. If we twist it further, we won't see anything here on these counterweights and on these. Well, that is, there was excess weight on the sides. Now look further. Here it is the front pulley suppressor of torsional vibrations. Here it has 2 fresh recesses. Once. Then the basket itself with a large flywheel. That is, well, here they are drilling with a basket, for example, and in one place I saw here now I will try to show. There it is. Well, I can still do that. Then I'll sort it out, show you a little detail. That's not the recess. This is balancing the flywheel itself. Now let's get closer to the details in numbers. So here I am balancing the crankshafts and doing a number of other operations on the Navy about the motor. Well, I'll throw a link in the description. They always give a paper about the work done. By the way, I'll show you the rest now. So, look here, the crankshaft. He's an order of herbalists, that is me. The crankshaft, he had a beating of more than 25 grams made less than 3. Well, the tolerance is no more than 3 grams, right? Next, crankshaft plus flywheel. Immediately, the imbalance of 127 grams became made less than 3, but as I understand it, 127 grams is a front pulley, a mini flywheel, a torsional vibration damper and the largest flywheel, that is, 127 grams less than 3 balanced everything. Then the crankshaft plus the flywheel plus the basket. Well, here he is again. The beat is more than 50. Made less than 3. Here. That is, I show this to the fact that, well, it's just usually considered that balancing the crankshaft is an absolutely unnecessary thing, money paid for nothing, since everything is eternal on foreign cars and everything is done perfectly from the factory. That is, well, from the factory of one need, it was done perfectly, but after some time an imbalance appeared. By the way, here is the paper here on the completed works. Please. That is, I was boring the block. Well, for example. Yes, somehow someone wrote to me that I did not name the price. I don't name the prices because I have nothing to show them with. I can tell from the lantern. Well, 1,813 hryvnias for everything. So the first means that we have this here is the sprout of the honing unit, the pistons are measured, but this is not like the operation and the machining of the plane, that is, milling. Well, then everything else. That is, the connecting rods of the honing, that's the most on the connecting rods, that is, the honing of the upper head of the lower well, and everything else, that is, BMW please. Here's the crankshaft. Separately, by the way, the balancing of the shaft is 612 hryvnia, please. Here, well, everything else. By the way, I asked you to drill the block for me so that they were centered from the bed of the crankshaft, so that everything was normal and correct. So now let's look at it further. Then I always assemble a piston one. Well, because it's easy to put the front and rear covers, the most important thing is the piston. So, here is the piston here, Kolbenschmidt original 84 and 25. Here, but the only thing I want to note, I personally did not like the fact that, well, here they are with the rings. Here, the rings are ordinary oil removable box type, not typeset. I wanted to put the typesetting here, but Kolbenschmidt on these engines, and I disassembled the same engine just before that, which was normal, that is, there were also such rings. Well, the only thing that's bad is that just the run-in will be much, well, let's just say, it needs to be run in more scrupulously and longer so as not to break anything and not to rip off. The most important thing is this here edge. Well, in principle, everything should be fine. Well, for the first time, of course, well, I think it may not be, but in principle there may be a small oil consumption while the whole thing is getting used. So, the pistons are here they are 8423, SP002, well, that is, the thermal gap, they always indicate the minimum thermal gap. I want to note that, for example, here is a piston from the same engine M50, but only late release. This is the one who was with Vanos, but these are moped pistons. They have here they are, well, standard 84, here they are. And here the joint venture is written 045, 0045, that is, 4.500. Well, the piston itself is made in -4.5, that is, roughly speaking, the cylinder is 84 wasted and that's it. Here I also want to note that they are a little bit, quite significantly different in height. Now, so that it can be seen like this. By the way, people wrote to me that you can either put another crankshaft with a large stroke, or even just connecting rods from the same two with pistons. It is easier to put pistons, respectively, there will be an effect. But the owner and I, that is, agreed, he said, I just want the original to make a normal repair with original spare parts without any modifications. Now look, here is the original piston, how much does it weigh? 435 6/10 so, and from the carcass, well, that is, the later 313, that is, the difference is certainly significant, somewhere up to more than 100 grams. Well, of course there will be an increase from this in any case, but these are additional operations. Now it means look, well, it was such a small clutch. Now look at the weight distribution, let's take a walk. That's why I like these pistons 435 and 6, then 435 and 5. Well, that is, in general, the tolerance is 3 grams for pistons, 435 and 6. Well, that is, the piston is just a sight. I've already hung them all up and just shows this one here is the lightest, it's half a gram lighter than all the others. Here's next. That is, there is nothing to saw, adjust, cut out on these pistons to balance them, I think. That is, it is also not necessary to achieve a completely filigree weight. This is by pistons. By the way, they are also all the same in size, that is, they were measured, they did not even begin to mark where the first, second, third and so on are. That is, they are all the same. Then we look at the fingers. We take fingers 103 and 8, so we take it further. It's just that I'm 103 and 9, that is, 8. Well, that is, the difference is literally a penny. That is, not even a penny, but 1/10 of a gram. That is, you see, fingers, the whole thing is done exclusively with soap. Nothing needs to be adjusted by weight. So, and now the connecting rods that have been repaired. The bushings were replaced here. The upper head, it is being hennied by technology now. So, well, here we are. Here are 570, that is, 597 and 51 we have something. We take the second and 7, this one is 2 grams heavier. I want to remind you that the tolerance for connecting rods in a variety of they can be 10 grams, in some cars even 20, but it's a little easier. I mean, you see, that's what I was just now. This is the easiest one. Now I will show that he is light, and that is the heaviest. That is, the difference is about a maximum of 4 grams. To do with these, to balance, that is, their total weight. Of course, you can try to hang them out to 0 at all, but it's difficult because the connecting rods are balanced. That is, I'm showing it to what? Because their total weight is basically the same, everything is fine in the tolerance and they are made the same as twins, that is, everything is done normally. Because by balancing the connecting rods, it is necessary to weigh the upper head separately, that is, leaning somewhere, the support is taken on this surface, centered on this surface, that is, the upper head is weighed to the upper head, because it goes along with the piston, the reciprocating mass is. And the lower head, because it rotates together with the crankshaft, that is, it rotates constantly. Tolerance, as I have already said, well, about 10 grams, I have 20 in some engines. Here they differ even less than 4, there are somewhere 3 to 8, maybe they drive how many there are, well, roughly 4 grams, they differ here. The point here, I think, is that nothing is needed to post it all to 0 anyway, you basically won't do this, but something is worse somewhere. That is, to break the balance, it can be broken. Therefore, in this regard, of course, the piston is amazing. The pistons are already assembled with connecting rods. I have shown the process of mounting them on the block more than once. I just want to mention some design features. So, look, first of all, there's a forward arrow, right? And usually, well, I'll show you in more detail on the block now, that is, the connecting rod locks here they are on the inserts that go, the locks, they stand in the course of rotation. That is, if your arrow goes forward, the engine rotates to the right side, that is, the locks should be on this side. But the previous engines that I disassembled, the first engine I disassembled, that the locks were on the other side. I thought, well, maybe someone climbed into it and put it wrong, although all 6 pieces are unlikely. And the second engine, when I disassembled, that is, the same thing, there were padlocks on the same side, so basically I don't think this is very correct, but in principle, that is, once the plant has done, I won't change anything. This is the first moment. That is, always pay attention when disassembling how much it costs. And the second point concerning the locks of the rings, how to breed them. There are basically 2 main prescriptions. This is the first one at 120 degrees and 180 degrees. I'll always tell 180 degrees. Moreover, there should be a ring, there should be a lock, for example, the first compression one. It's all, well, any rings, that 120, that 180, they are placed at 45 degrees relative to the axis of the finger and the end of the piston. That is, they should not be on the finger, they should not be on the skirt. That is, like this is the castle, that is, 145 degrees. The second compression ring is removed. We'll take him now. Well, in general, it is diverted in the other direction. I'm just not going to breed them now, they're already there anyway, well, roughly speaking, that is, it will still need to be corrected there and the oil ring becomes right here, but the second ring turned out again. But I still breed them before installing it, I just show them beforehand. That is, roughly speaking, here it is the first, second, third ring. And that's it. Before installation, it is necessary to lubricate the cylinder. This is the synthetic transmission oil that I showed at the beginning of the video. So I lubricate the cylinder with it. Well, accordingly, wipe it before that, blow it out so that it is clean there without any garbage, sand and other things and other things and other things. So now we take the piston with the connecting rod, they are already ready. That is, I have a mandrel like this, I showed it in the video for storing rings. So we put it. Since they are the same, you can do anything here. Well, that is, as you want, and stock them up like this. Then a little edge, so that it all this tape normally lay on the piston and you can tighten this thing.
Немножко кромку, чтобы она вся вот эта лента нормально легла на поршень. И можно это дело подтянуть.
Well, in principle, it is not always necessary to tighten up. That's it. And now the most important thing is with a hammer without effort, that is, just under its own weight with small blows, light blows of a heavy hammer, the whole thing is stored up.
То есть просто под собственным весом мелкими ударами, легкими ударами тяжелого молотка все это дело запасовывается.
Moreover, you need to apply, well, push it not in the center, but in a circle, that is, walk so that the rings have already come there.
Чтобы он туда... Вот, уже подошли кольца.
Here, once, the ring has passed. That is, well, set up, of course, oil removing rings go much easier. They are steel, that is, they are more spring-loaded. Here he stands the piston. The main thing, the most important thing at the same time is not to hammer anything there, because there is a very delicate edge on the oil rings. Well, as gentle, that is, it's just much easier to break it than on the oil collecting rings. And so, in principle, probably rings are like rings. Well, I also want to note that these are a set of original rings. Such they sit quite tightly in the piston. That is, to me personally, I put Maleshny, Samovsky, even Getsevsky. They are much simpler there, much. That is, somehow they were put more gently. So, well, now we turn it over. Well, usually I do this whole thing all together, but this is to clearly show. Here it is a hook, well, more precisely, we put the lid of the lower head piece, that is, here they are locks on this side as I disassembled, so they are here. Just like the root bolts here, you can and should lubricate the thread a little. Well, that is, again, without any fanaticism, and all this is then tightened with a torque wrench. The thread M9 is tightened here and it is tightened with an effort of 5 and 4 kilograms approximately. Well, that is, when a tightening force is given, let's say some value of 5 and 4, it means that there is a maximum of like 5 and 8 possible, and a minimum of like 5 0 there or even 4 and 9. So, look. There is. Everything rotates and everything else is collected in this way. After the piston is assembled and installed, I just want to demonstrate that everything rotates in principle easily, that is, I rotate my hand by the flywheel. I want to pay attention, that is, I'm not putting any great effort there or anything like that. That is how it should all rotate. So, according to the thermal gap, as I have already said here, they indicate on the pistons a minimum thermal gap of 200. I made 350 here, because well, I think 200 is still a little bit, that is, it's a minimum, well, a little bit is not enough. That is, 3.5 is just right. So I also want to note the moment that the pistons here protrude by about 1 mm. Well, I measured the rods for us, that is, I didn't exactly mark it how much, that is, about 1 mm output. Therefore, you need to put a gasket here. There is a gasket 175 regular, there are 205 repair. Therefore, just so that the gasket is slightly higher, just so that the head is milled and so that this height can withstand. Further assembly of the engine begins with the assembly of auxiliary units, but first of all the oil pump itself is installed. Usually, of course, not only on these engines, but in principle in general, people do not claim to disassemble the oil pump, and moreover, to wash it or do something with it. But it needs to be disassembled, well, at least I think so, that it needs to be disassembled to check two things. That is, firstly, whether there are no scratches anywhere, all this is the first moment. The second point, it needs to be washed, blown, because sometimes. In principle, I saw such a case only once, that some kind of carbon got under the pressure reducing valve, well, some garbage, I don't know, something got in and it didn't overlap normally, that is, there was a loss of oil pressure from this. Here, in this BMW engine, an oil pump, unlike other analogs, well, I mean our domestic ones, a rotary oil pump is used, which is its two elements, an external and an internal rotor. Well, that is, the master and the slave. On Fords, for example, they make them smaller, I mean fewer of these blades here. There are 4 blades on the master, 5 vents on the slave. On different cars, the same type as the 8, 9, front-wheel drive and different foreign cars there, a large rotor is made there, it is flat, very large, there are many of these sections. Well, in general, if for a long time, so as not to move away for a long time, I can only say that the surfaces here are normal everywhere, polished, that is, there are no chips on the teeth there and so on and so on and so on. Therefore, the whole thing can be collected without a second thought. The only thing from the design features, an aluminum body and an aluminum cover, are used here. Well, it's not aluminum, as I understand it, it's some kind of D16T, well, I'm just saying, that is, there is an alloy. Usually it is mandatory on such pumps, but on gear pumps or there on some rotary ones, they necessarily rest on one side against a polished hot steel plate. There is no such thing here by design. Well, in principle, as you can see, it is not necessary, that is, the whole thing is going great. Here I have already washed the case. The case, just like all the other parts of the block and the block itself, I just washed with a Kärcher. I even have my own video on this topic. Well, that is, I've already blown it, that is, it's just such a preliminary wipe with a cloth. And now you can collect this case. So I want to note that a label is made on these elements on one side. Well, here the square is stamped, there is sometimes a dot. On the other hand, there is no such thing. Here it is, with just one. And it's the same on the driven gear. That is, there is a label, there is no one here. These labels are needed. That is, if someone thinks that it is necessary to combine them by labels. That is, you do not combine them, in any case, after several turns, that is, they will not disperse. Now I'll show you again. Here, that is, they diverge. This is done in order to indicate the direction, that is, that you need to collect it from one side of the label, and let's say not like this, that is, not the other way around. This is where there is a small constructive, well, not a difference, a feature of, say, a pump. The same marks are on all pumps. I lubricate this whole thing, the whole body with the transmission synthetic oil that I showed earlier. So. Well, I want to note, that is, it is inserted here, it turns easily. It is also undesirable to put it on dry, well, until the oil reaches here. That is, it is necessary to lubricate it. Now we are trying to show it. Now we are so that it is more or less convenient, I will put it. Here we will spend here. Well, the rotor itself is lubricated in the same way. I have a separate oil can specially for the assembly of the engine, which is clean, that is, there are no additional ones in it. That is, only pure oil for assembly. Well, the whole system rotates. I want to note, that is, the whole system works in such a way that on one side of the pump, I'm going to turn it, oh, that is, on one side of the camera, that's if I rotate it. Look, for example, I rotate it. On this side of the cameras, the volume increases all the time, and on the other side, it decreases all the time. Now we are here. Well, that is, roughly speaking, on the one hand it has an intake, even here it is done on the lid. That is, on the one hand there is an oil intake, on the other hand there is an outlet. This design is more preferable, because unlike a gear oil pump with a rotor design is such that the oil here, if on the gears, there it is necessary to crush it roughly with a gear, it crushes the oil with a tooth, then here it is displaced, that is, well, a little bit better. Tech. So, well, I want to note that I have collected these squares here, they are all inside. So, well, once again, all this can be lubricated, but without fanaticism. That is, the main thing is to give him some oil at the initial moment. Now I still have a spout for him. By the way, here is the left thread on the gear that attaches the nut. Here it is, the whole thing is inserted. Here it works. Well, actually the whole assembly. So here it is fasteners. There are 4 longer bolts and 2 shorter ones for fixing this pipe here. There was a gasket in the original, but nothing bad will happen if this pipe is put on a thin layer of sealant. That is, it is not so fundamental. Unfortunately, there was no complete set of gaskets for this engine. Here's how, for example, I bought a Lexus. That is, the complete set is where all the seals, all gaskets are. Of course, I would put my regular gasket here. Well, since there are already only the most basic elements, we have taken. Right? Well, look, I'm collecting it. I specifically want to show all this in order to show that after assembly it should rotate. Here it is. It should rotate by hand. Well, accordingly, there are no backlashes here. Although the backlash should be looked at dry, without oil. Because if there are any small backlashes there, well, the whole thing drags on, that is, without any extra effort, it's still M6 plus in an aluminum case. It's not necessary to tighten it too much. That's it, here it rotates here. Now the pressure reducing valve. The pressure reducing valve on the hoe is his big shaft. Now the spring, the piston itself is this slider in the locking cylinder. That is, by design, this piston is inserted into the shaft. By the way, there are even small scuffs and marks on it here, but you don't feel them so, well, roughly speaking, with your fingernail, that there are some burrs there. That is, it is a smooth surface. Well, it's just that, let's say, there is no carbon on them. That is, he rubbed himself with these places. Before I assemble it, I lubricate it so that everything goes. Fell. So that everything goes easily and normally. Well, I also lubricate the surface itself in the pump. So, here is the valve. Oh, that's it, he's gone there. Spring and locking cylinder. Well, he has a rubber ring here. In principle, of course, you can put a new one, but since this is an oil system and all this is inside the engine, that is, just so that oil does not flow from it, say, by a stream. In principle, you can also put a regular rubber band on this, or rather leave it. That is, here it goes there. So, well, now, perhaps, the most responsible thing is to put a locking ring in it. Come on, push. There it is a little bit necessary. It's with an elastic band now they're up past. Now, just a second. Here's a ring once. Right now, we're taking him there. These are the pliers. So. Well, that's it, let it go. Oh. Great. What? No, it's a scratch. Well, that's it. The washer is there. Of course, it's inconvenient to do it alone, of course. Well, here it all stands. Well, and further assembly, respectively. By assembling the rear cover of the block, well, or the rear crankshaft oil seal housing. In principle, there is nothing special. The only thing that I just wanted to note is that we took the oil seals forward and backward, well, the valve seals. Here you go. Also, well, it looks like the oil seal pressed here is very neat. That is, it is soft, normal, not oak. So also from the design features of the back cover, it is placed on the guide bushings here. That is, it is not necessary in this regard, of course, it is thought out, that is, it is not necessary, when you put it on, then rotate the crankshaft, that is, so that it falls into place. It's already falling into place. And according to the gasket, there was actually an ordinary gasket, well, such a green one, that is, like cardboard, well, I call them that jargon. But a man got me a metal gasket here. In general, in principle, that is, they are put here these metal packages, they are put without sealant. But, to be honest, all ready for unscrew. For caution, that is, I put a thin, very thin layer of sealant here, because well, after all, the block is old in time. There is some kind of corrosion on it in any case, at least small, at least some kind of corrosion will definitely be. No, just hold it for me. Different deformations, that is, plus the milling is peculiar. That is, so that it does not flow, I lubricate it necessarily partially with a sealant. I also want to note that this is the gasket, so maybe I didn't show it at the beginning. Now I will miss him and I will miss her more precisely and show her. So look, on the one hand, it has a butt for stamping, that is, here you can see that there is a depression here, there is a bulge, but I have already covered it up with a sealant like this. As a rule, it is usually placed on top of the bulge, that is, it is placed on the lid. Give me the sealant. Well, here again we need to smear with sealant the part that is exactly near the hole for the bolt fastening on the hold. It is necessary to smear the inside, because very often the mistake of many is smeared from the outside and inside no one smears and oil seeps through this hole under the bolt and then begins to sweat. That is, it does not flow, that is, so that it flows there were puddles under the engine, anyway, of course you will not have such a thing. By the way, I was somewhat wrong when I said that the bulget is placed to the lid, the bulget is placed just to the block, because the first time I put the gasket I did not match the holes. A. There is no need to turn the crankshaft here to center the cover. I also want to explain the moment why it was with a gasket, that is, I smeared the sealant anyway. With a gasket, this case is going to be because there are two holes for mounting under the pallet and if you put this case without a gasket, it may not match. That is, well, it will be difficult and more difficult to put a pallet. It's one thing if the pallet is metal, well, steel, then in principle it becomes there without problems, and aluminum, it's a little, that is, there is less room for maneuver, therefore. But nevertheless, that is, a gasket with a sealant because I still don't have confidence in the old block. That's it, to delay this case without fanaticism. Now the gasket is already compressed there, everything is with it. This here edge is crushed. I mean, oh, that's it. That is, there is nothing more to pull here. Also, the oil seal must be smeared with oil before installing it, so that it can be easily put on there. By the way, the last engine, when I disassembled it, there was no pin on the crankshaft. This is on this engine already when I disassembled it. Indeed, there is a groove in the flywheel for this pin and in the crankshaft itself. That is, the flywheel can no longer be confused. I mean, after balancing the flywheel, that is, I even have one hole here a little bit larger than the others. I just have a retainer here. Now I'll really relax him so that, and now he finds the crankshaft, that is, here it becomes tight. Next, I put the flywheel bolts on the blue lock. In general, on most foreign cars, the flywheel bolts are placed with a thread lock, but on blue, not on red hard, but on blue. In principle, when I was disassembling here, you can even see the remains here. There they are on the carving, there is a little bit of blue there. That is, it was all a case with the lock installed. Well, I use a loctite retainer. In principle, the price of quality suits me quite well. That is, you do not need to apply a retainer much. That is, I'm going to show it now, even I probably applied too much. That is, well, literally the tip. And the whole thing is screwed into the crankshaft. Usually 10 meters on the flywheels are tightened with an effort of about 8.5 kilograms. So, well, we'll put 8 and 4 somewhere. These are standard efforts on these bolts. That is, plus or minus of course. It may seem that the effort is actually, well, small. I assure you, this is not the case. This is absolutely 8.5 kilograms here, so as not to overstrain it, not to deform the crankshaft, that is, not to tear off the thread, nothing will happen to it here. Clutch here we took a hatch with a bearing with a basket. However, I do not remember the basket, in my opinion it is only the bearing and the hatch disc, the basket is a sax. And in order to center this matter, I have such things like this, that is, look, it is invested in the clutch itself and it goes into the crankshaft with a reciprocal part. But here I have it, in particular, sharpened on a cone, but it does not quite go in, that is, the second part of it is hanging out, but in principle, that is, it will be more or less possible to center it. Also, I did not say at the beginning of the video that the flywheel, well, first of all, here they are a hole, well, more precisely, a recess from drilling, so that when it was balanced. The second point is that the surface is worn, that is, it was heavily worn here. Well, in principle, here the disc is conveniently placed on top, that is, it is not necessary to hold anything on the weight. That is, in principle, it can even be assembled without centering this thing here. Well, I'm already going to insert it for caution, it's not difficult. I also want to note that here is the label when balancing with paint. Well, the truth is here it is on the other hand, I can see a little paint here. That is, specifically so as not to confuse the basket and not to put it on the other side. I immediately answer the question, if you need to replace the basket in the future, well, you can't do anything here, because, well, that means the basket will already have the balance that the manufacturer had. The bolts here mount M8, well, this is in particular from the 8, because the native bolts, when I gave the native ones for balancing. I didn't have any relatives, because the engine was already without a clutch. Well, in general, 8-dimensional, that is, bolts from the basket, also from the basket. They are no worse. That is, if someone thinks that since it's bolts from the 8, then it's 100% bad. Well, then it's bad. I don't think it's a bad thing. This is the first. Secondly, this element is not the same, that is, loaded like the rest of the engine. In addition, he is sitting on the centering pins, that is, in any case, the moment will be transmitted normally here. And after all the cases, we take a torque wrench, the standard force for M8 is 2 and 2. Well, they are now his 2 and 2. I'm already tightening it there even by hand. That is, to drag the same thing. There is no need to drag them. That's all. This is quite enough for everything to hold up normally. It hasn't gone anywhere, the disc is in the center. Well, now, as a matter of fact, the assembly of the front part. It is slightly different from conventional engines. So look, well, like my version, that is, how I understand the matter. I will first put a pump, an oil pump, here it is on pin standing here. First I'll put it up and show you something. That is, I just put it on. So look, the oil pump drive chain here goes directly from the crankshaft to the pump without an additional tensioner. Well, for example, on Fords, they like to put tensioners on some there. Here it goes straight and the chain is stretched. Well, as it is stretched, at least it is more or less elastic. Here are rubber rings on the gears here, that is, it turns out if you insert a chain, that is, it does not immediately go there, that is, it is done specifically to pull the chain. By the way, by the star, by the asterisk. The part that is slightly more worn out will go to the drive pump, which is more lively, it will go to the head already. This gear was difficult to find. So look, that is, what I'm showing this whole thing for, telling you. By the way, the gear that is put on the pump, here you see the imprint of the nut, here is the imprint, that is, the shaft. Well, that is, it is desirable to put it in the form in which it was. So look, here I put a star, that is, here it is the whole system, right? And now look, I'm just showing you. That is, here I put it on the crankshaft and now we will scroll a little here, here it becomes tight on the rubber band on the seal there, so if you scroll it here a little bit, that is, you can see that it is not easy, that is, it does not fit there gently. So look, here I am, we have this whole thing ready. I put it here and it can be seen that it does not match here, probably, I hope the center to center distance will be visible. Well, that is, roughly speaking, just to put it there, well, maybe you can, if you strain it with some kind of crowbar, but there are no opportunities like that. That is, what needs to be done for this. So, that is, I want to demonstrate the chain once again, so that in this case, look, there is one part of the asterisk, that is, here I am twisting, it can be seen that it does not quite get into the teeth right away, roughly speaking, because of the gum. So now I change the gear, well, I put another asterisk and that's the same thing. Well, that is, it means that if suddenly someone thinks that they are not interchangeable, that is, the surfaces are different. Now look, in order to put this whole thing together, now I'm demonstrating, you need to. Why I say that the feature of the installation, well, for example, I do not know, maybe there is an easier way. That is, the oil pump is also assembled before it is screwed on, that is, it plays a little here, that is, it can be tilted. He bends down and puts on a star here. Right now we are trying to show the whole thing live. The oil pump, the features of its installation are that this part, well, by design, it is placed on the block without a gasket. So there even when I disassembled and according to the manual there, well, rather, according to the catalog, the person was not looking, he did not find gaskets here, but since this is a pressure line, there is still oil pressure here, that is, the main one. I've already just tried how it is compressed with a sealant here. So, I put it on the sealant. And I want to note that the layer of sealant applied here is here. Now I'm just going to show you, I'm going to smear here, so, that is, a layer of sealant does not need to be applied here, some such huge layer of sealant to be squeezed out. No, look, you see, I missed with my finger. Thin film, that is, you can even take it off here in places. This sealant is quite enough to put a pump so that it seals it. So now, just a second. Look, we're putting a pump on. The only thing is that I will immediately bait a few mounting bolts. Now the gear installation is again here, that is, come. Well, it is advisable to put it the way it was with the nut. So, look, we put it like this. Well, Sanic, help me here. It's just more convenient for two people here, so that one person drops this asterisk. That is, I'm lowering it, he doesn't get here, poor thing, right? Now we're going to spin for a second. You know what, let me twist it or you twist it. There, so that it gets on the slots. Oh, look, all stop. Stop, here's a look at the whole system assembled. Now I will tighten the pump, so now we will tighten the nut now. This nut here, it is placed without a lock, without anything, because there is a left thread. Look here. Once and podzitayajavim. I now have the engine on a lock with a flywheel, which I showed a little earlier. Now I'm just trying not to strain him. Here, by the way, to tighten somehow too much there, well. You don't need to do this with superpowers. Everything becomes fine as it is. So, I've removed the retainer here. We look, that is, how the whole system works. That is, everything is fine, it's worth it. And the chain at the same time, that is, there is some kind of free movement, that is, it is not stretched like a string, but at the same time it is not weakened. The rest of the assembly is very simple. The design features are that they are, well, I certainly don't like this design, that the part of the lid that is adjacent to the front is the support surface for the gasket. Just in production, when repairing the lid, it is necessary to fasten it in order to cut it. Well, such a small inconvenience. But in general, the construction of this is different when assembling, that is, nothing prevents me from installing all the other elements. So look, about the chain pacifier. Well, we just washed it, it's an old sedative, that is. Here you are, it's being put here. The only thing is, do not forget to hang the chain immediately before installation and all installation. The chain, by the way, is a regular one here, which was standing here. We didn't change it, this chain. On some designs it's simple, here it is on the latches of such. Oh, here it is, click. That's it, this one. Didn't snap. Oh, there he is. That's all, that is, he has a small free move here, please, with a chain. So then the shoe itself, this one here, well, it is also sometimes called a ski, although the shoe sounds more correct. That is, the same thing it is put, please here. That, by the way, is what I'm saying, don't forget to put a chain, because after it's. Well, on some here you can unscrew it at all, well, rather, take it aside and stock the chain. On some constructions, this can no longer be done. Here you can lubricate it a little. In principle, even if you assemble it dry, there's nothing terrible about it, because in any case it's not a moving element. The lubricant will get here in any case and it is stretched, that is, when the engine is running at startup, one single time, well, roughly speaking, once. Right? And he is here with such a locking ring it is put. So, it can be seen, it can be seen. Did it get on the lens? No, it dripped. Well, here it is, the whole assembly element. And that's it. That is, the design in this regard is very simple, that is, a minimum of details. C, 2 chains, shoes everything. By the way, if we look at the design in more detail, now we will catch the focus. Look, you see the chain here it does not stand on the asterisk completely, because it rests on this damper, it is rubber. The same as with the pump. Well, this is just an additional demonstration of the design features. Now you can put the front cover, well, that is, the front case, roughly speaking. This means that the design feature is again what pleases me on foreign cars, not only on BMW, but on similar structures of any kind. Here holes for pins are made in the block, and here they are the pins themselves. 1, 2. That is, during installation, firstly, it is necessary so that the surface is then aligned with the surface, well, that is, in parallel with the block, so that the head is installed, well, and also it reduces additional operations for centering the front oil seal. That is, roughly speaking, I put the lid on and I don't need to scroll anything here with the crankshaft so that everything falls into place. This whole system is with a front cover, it is installed on 2 gaskets, which are laid one on one side, the other on the other side. Again, here's the gasket by the way, now I'll just show you. These are the gaskets, no longer metal, ordinary. You can again put this lid here without a gasket, but in principle, that is, as I said earlier, here again they are holes for fixing the pallet, that is, in order to avoid unnecessary worries later in order to drive the bolts there, because if it is driven obliquely, it will tear the thread or damage, that is, no one needs it. But the gaskets are gaskets, but I collect all the gaskets without exception with a sealant. Before assembling, I degrease the surface. I manage to degrease it well, I generally do it with the help of such a solvent. But it is necessary again to see that the solvent is dry, that is, there is such a fatty solvent as diesel fuel, and there is dry. It takes extra time, I mean to degrease, apply a sealant, but nevertheless in the future you should not have any problems with this. Again, according to the sealant, according to how much it is applied. It is necessary to apply the sealant a little, that is, since it is a gasket, since there is nothing here that is, big, crooked or something else in this here. That is, you need to apply a little sealant so that it literally lubricates the support surface. If you look at the surface of the block in more detail, you can see that, of course, the surface was processed with some kind of tool, in particular, milling here. Here, in principle, milling, we must pay tribute to the fact that even the surface under the head on our engines is milled worse than just the surface under the lid here. That is, if you hold it with your fingernail, that is, with your finger, that is, there are no such notches. But all the same, since the block is already quite old, that is, it is more than 20 years old, that is, it could have been slightly warped somewhere there are some small furrows here that remain. That's what a sealant is for. That is, again, if you collect a leak on the gasket, puddles, there will not be anything like that under it, but after a while the joint may be covered, the seam may be covered with such a layer of just such wet dust, say, that is, it will be seen that a little somewhere leaks. Therefore, I never regret anything in this regard, that is, I need a sealant, again, I will smear it now and I do not need to apply it here. There are very, very many, but here, by the way, here they are, these surfaces need to be covered up. This is the plug, by the way, it is necessary in any case. Look here. So, now. That is, you don't need to apply a lot of it here, but it should be enough to provide, especially where the pump is, because these places under the pump are sometimes covered with corrosion, well, in general, different, it depends on how the engine was operated. So I also want to note that it is necessary to smear the part of the hole that goes inside with a sealant, that is, you cannot smear it from the outside, roughly speaking, but you need to smear it inside, right? Now we take the gasket, well, look, here is such a gasket here goes under the pump partial. So look here, I'm installing it here. Well, first of all, she will sit a little better. Look, everything matches according to the holes. Well, of course the gaskets are normal, there are normal gaskets, because there are gaskets that, to put it mildly, do not really coincide with these, but with holes. It's certainly simpler here. I literally put such a seam here, smeared it a little. If it is problematic with the gasket, that is, I say again, before the hero, you can just assemble it cleanly on the sealant, but it's better not to do this already. And gaskets, as far as I know, are not so expensive here, that is, they are not such cosmic money to save on this, and well, roughly speaking, you will not save on this. Well, look, now the gaskets are fine, they won't go anywhere. So it's possible, it's not scary the sealant got here. And now it's the same with the lid. So, well, here it is, the whole lid is smeared. That's it. And now you can install all this again thanks to the pins, so where is this one here, thanks to the pins, the lid is installed. Now we will fix this gasket a little bit so that all the holes matched. Here it is, the lid is sitting and you can immediately tighten it without centering the oil seal. So the fasteners that are put here are exactly on the front cover because here it is connected with the cooling system. I recommend everyone to always put on copper grease, that is, it's just the tip of the thread in the can, here it is, well, it is covered with copper grease so, but I have more fasteners in my hands here, because I still have fasteners left from the second engine. Well, rather not from the second, but from the first engine that I disassembled, and I decided to choose a normal fastener here, so it's enough to tighten it just by hand. And a little bit at a time, gradually all the bolts, so as not to skew anything anywhere, not to squeeze. That is, gradually all the bolts are being tightened here, this will absolutely be enough. It sits well on the gasket. Everything. The main thing is not to over-tighten, so as not to damage the lid, not to tear the thread. That will be more than enough here anyway. After the entire cover is tightened, it is possible and necessary to install this flange on which the front pulley sits. Before installing it, it is necessary to lubricate the surface with oil, so that when it is inserted here and so that the oil seal is not damaged, so that it slides on oil. Look, it's also easy to put here by the way, that is, here you are. Here he is now. Click there. One of the advantages of the design is that this flange is tightened with this big bolt, and the pulley is already further hung, regardless of whether the central bolt is tightened or not. I mean, he's so big here. The skiff, too, by the way, will not be confused, there is a pin for centering. That is, it is difficult to confuse it. Next, in order to tighten the front bolt, I want to draw your attention, I have a lock on the crankshaft, but I had a Zigulevsky one from Zigulevsky, that is, he modified it a little here to fit me here. So our chain, well, in principle, you can throw it there, it won't go anywhere, and now you can calmly tighten it normally. Now I have a stand here that drives a little, that is, I want to note that it needs to be tightened there. By the way, there is a regulatory effort with which it is tightened all, but believe me, there is enough of such a tightening here completely, that is, there is no retainer, nothing to put it on. He will work like this and he will not go anywhere. The installation of the pallet on this engine is in principle a very simple procedure, because the pallet itself is aluminum, so different steel pallets need to be straightened. Well, it happens that these surfaces are here, they are all squeezed there. This does not happen with aluminum pallets, well, unless they crack. So, this is the first one. The second is the gasket that will stand here. Here it is such a metal, rubberized viturains. These are the pads I really like, that is, it is steel with a rubber base. They are placed without sealant, that is, everything here is crimped normally, nothing will ever leak. Also fasteners. Well, fasteners, again, here I have fasteners from two engines, that is, here partially without washers, a Raznobojkik is like this. I blew it all out with copper grease. So, but the only thing without a sealant is of course without a sealant, but these are the places where the lid joins, which, well, that is, the front cover and the back, I lubricate a little with sealant in order to exclude the possibility that, well, you never know, there will be a small duct, that is, to exclude the possibility that there will be fogging. The sealant is applied here a little bit, now, by the way, I will partially remove it there. But this must be done, because in any case, the gasket may not fully fit the joint there. That is, here is a sealant one, too, it's enough to oil it with a finger here. So here and here. The gasket is now being installed. I want to note that, in principle, it is placed in one position, that is, there are small ones here, for example, here is a mark for a hole, well, technological, that is, stamping all this is installed in its place. Naturally, the hole is what we must pay tribute to on foreign-made engines, the holes always match. That is, it is not necessary to mess with him, there is something to do with him so much. Well, that is, in any case, it needs to be corrected a little. So, well, here he is a pallet. And then all the screws are being baited, and I also want to note that it is not necessary to tighten them too much, that is, it tightens, that is, the whole thing is squeezed calmly and easily. In the assembled state, it looks like this. I just want to add that the gasket is metal. I like the fact that when you tighten all these screws, that is, they reach a certain stop. That is, the elastic band was crushed there, it's all on the metal needle. And then already, that is, you feel that you can't drag it, unlike the usual same cork pads. Well, in principle, of course, if there are no gaskets on this pallet or there say you want to save money, you can of course put the pallet on a sealant, but if there is a normal farm gasket, then why invent something like that already? In addition, speaking of touching the gasket, that is, again, of course, you can put everything on the sealant, but here there is a certain attachment point in the pallet. Well, that is, there for the shield, which is already on the box, there it all goes to the bell. If you put it just like that on a sealant without a gasket, then the distance is this, that is, it will come closer to the engine, well, that is, well, to the block, and this is the distance it will shift, that is, then there will be problems with the combination. Therefore, it is better to make a gasket. I prefer to put the crankshaft pulley after installing the pallet. Well, it doesn't really matter, I'll put it 10 minutes earlier or 10 minutes later. But the fact is that look here, he gets so on his pin and part of it closes the pallet. Well, that is, of course, you can insert all these bolts here, bait, tighten, but why add some worries to yourself once again? That is, no difference. I also want to note that before disassembly, well, there is a pin here, as I showed earlier, that is, you can't put it any other way, but this little skiff, in principle, also makes no difference how to put it, but here, too, I marked it with a marker so that it would be exactly in its place. The only thing he finds here so hard is this. The main thing, by the way, is this skiff, but now I'm going to tighten it with bolts here a little. The main thing is not to hit him with a hammer, because he is very gentle, that is, if you hit him somewhere, I saw a damaged place here somewhere, well, that is, before that, apparently, someone touched him. That is, he will just bend and that's it. In addition, hitting the crankshaft is also prohibited by the instruction. Well, the only thing I want to show is one bolt, one was torn off, the second has such a thing as a caul, I don't know. Well, in general, I don't like this thread, so I'll put a couple of my bolts here, but one will be without a washer, because it was so by design. In general, these are the bolts. That is, in principle, you can stand them here without a washer. The main thing is that they are normal in the sense that, well, some kind of German fasteners, because it's not something that is sold, roughly speaking, in the epicenter for a ruble, a bunch, roughly speaking, as well as a puff, that is, not much, that is, we twist the bolts by 120 degrees, that is, so that everything it fell into place so that it would not be distorted anywhere and nothing would be torn off. Right? Well, it's great here. Also, as for tightening these screws here, you do not need to tighten them with any great effort. That is, even a regular 2 and 2 kilograms of effort on these screws is more than enough, that is, even I would say in a sense too much. That is, everything, that is, the cranking of the crankshaft. They will not sit better from this if they are dragged there, roughly speaking. That is, well, I even hold on to the phone with one hand. That's all, that is, no special effort and that's it. And again, it does not overstrain. Everything, the whole system is worth it. Well, since the skiff is standing, now you can also install a pump at the same time. Nothing is interfering with anything here anymore. So I want to note again, I have already repeated it several times, but it is not a sin to repeat it once again. Look at these hairpins here, they are a little rusty, that is, if you look closely like that, I probably showed it before in previous videos, so it means that since this system is in contact with the coolant here, of course, if you pour a normal liquid here, which should not cause corrosion, then nothing it shouldn't corrode there. But nevertheless, they need a little copper. Now we will remove the copper remnants here. Lubricate them with copper so that nothing will sour later and you can unscrew it all normally. So, here we'll clean it up. The pump that stands here, but here it is no longer the original BMW, that is, BMW was written on that one. There is no such thing here. Oops. Here, in principle, in theory, the whole structure is inserted into this shaft and here it is a rubber ring, a rubber sealer, that is, in principle, the system does not require the presence of a sealant. But just knowing for the future, that is, it is necessary to apply a sealant here, not because in general they hold these rubber bands normally, but they hold normally under one condition: if the pump surface is normal, well, roughly speaking, new and the surface is on the lid itself. But since it is a surface here, in principle, it certainly does not have such eaten-out shells, as happens there on Ziguli engines, somewhere else. But in principle, that is, it is already uneven, not as smooth as it was before. That is, there are still elements of corrosion. Therefore, in order to protect myself from fine fogging, I put on the pump. Here we will now show the sealant. Here, by the way, you can put a sealant without hesitation. That is, not well, again, of course, without any spoons or ladles there, but here it is. In addition, with a sealant, the rubber comes in easier, that is, it lubricates it partially so. Well, besides, all this will be guaranteed to stand normally. So the only thing I do not know, or rather I do not know, but I do not see the difference between how to put this pump this way or that way. Well, in fact, as I understand it, there is no difference here, although in fact there should be a drain on these pumps. Well, here it is, look, here it is a pump. So, in principle, there is no difference, but on the one hand there is such a plug, so, here it is. Now I'll take it so that for now, and on the other hand, there is no it. And, as a rule, with this plug here, because there's a duct over there, this is if the pump is flowing, well, that is, the seal is already starting to leak, the liquid should be drained. That is, it is put down accordingly. That's the difference. Well, as it is, in principle there is no difference. If you accidentally put a pump on. Oh, you see, oh, click. We will take all the remaining sealant from here now, so that nothing sticks out. I have a booth. No, I don't need a rag. Instead of a rag, I have a stand for the engine. I have a rubberized one here, such a rubberized corner. So it's all spinning, it doesn't touch anything anywhere. Then we tighten the whole thing with nuts. If you put a pump, roughly speaking, that is, you collect it and put the pump on the contrary, that is, with this drain channel up. Well, in principle, there is nothing terrible in this, it will not work worse from this, but the only thing that increases is the probability that if some garbage gets there, since it is on top, let's say you have it, it can quickly cut down the sealing element, that is, roughly speaking, the resource is reduced. Here, but so for the first time, if it is, then it will not get worse from this. Well, again, we tighten it without any turbo effort. That's about 8 kilograms, so. According to the regulations, 7, 6, 10 newtons, that is, 1 kilogram. But it depends on what, how and where. So right away, and of course put the pulley, since everything is already conveniently on the engine. Why not do it? By the way, they use a fan here. Well, I do not know exactly how on this engine, but they like to put fans with a thermal coupling on BMW, that is, it turns arbitrarily, and then when the temperature reaches a certain point, the clutch jams there and it starts spinning at a pump speed, yes, at a speed of pumps. But I personally don't like the system, because it's still unreliable, because in any case, the fan will have no more revolutions than the engine is spinning. This is not a classic electric fan, and in terms of reliability, in principle, would not say that this system is reliable. So, well, a puff of course. A puff. It's the same to pull them without fanaticism. The only thing that I have from the tightening features, that is, I put a screwdriver, I rest between one of the bolts and the body of the pump itself. Well, for example, here I need to come here and here I hold a screwdriver and pull it up. But I'm pulling it up here, you don't need to tighten it too much. That is, here I am again betting, here I have two of them, here, once. That is, well, you see, I do this business without. Even I don't have a full ratchet, that is, I don't fully hold it with my hand. This, believe me, is enough. So, I jumped off now. That is, believe me, it's enough. Quite. During further work with the head, when I had already washed it with a Kircher, that is, then I began to wipe it with a solvent for subsequent assembly, this unpleasant moment turned out. Here it is. Which is this? Here it is a crack. The only one. And I want to notice now I'm going to get up like this, she's going over the carving. That is, the crack is deep. And so it is impossible to leave this head. Otherwise, there is simply no sense of repair. Of course, that is, here I showed the previous video with the assembly of this engine. That is, I scratched him here with a screwdriver, there, well, with a rag. I did not notice this crack, it was not visible. But when I washed her head, that is, it seems I missed it turns out, but. That is, in any case, it is necessary to repair this case in other cylinders everything is fine. So, I want to notice they meet sometimes, now I'll show you. Here they are. These are the hairs I call them. Well, it's not full-fledged. This can be called of course a crack, but it is not a full-fledged crack, since it does not go further to the thread there is simply nowhere and that is, well, roughly speaking, a little bit, well, for example, the most classic example. Here he is a little hair like that. He's only the top part. Well, you can meet such a one on a lot of heads, he just doesn't go there any further. That is, and this is all allowed. Even Volkswagen has a crack tolerance between the saddles they're up to a certain size. That is, these are here, too, of course there is nothing good about it. Well, this is such a surface, that is, it's rather not just a crack, it's some kind of bruising, but it's not scary in principle. The head is after repair, I just want to demonstrate where the crack was. Well, that is, everything was brewed, everything was done and now they are new saddles. That is, in order to boil it all, then thread it, cut the thread. Here she is the place where she was there. That is, everything is fine here, and accordingly the saddles are new. So the head after that, it must be checked by ultrasound, well, or something like that, I personally just didn't see it, well, I wasn't present, that is, it is included in the cost of repair. That is, it must be checked after that how it is and what's with it. So here's what I showed earlier, there is some rudimentary something similar to a crack, that is, it may be some rudimentary hairs, but the check showed that nothing poisons anywhere, does not flow, that is, the head is absolutely normal. Only in this place. And by the way, at this point she really reached the cooling jacket. Here, that is, everything is fine with the head is fully usable, workable, so, but you see how important it is. When the man gave it to me, he told me that in these places, here they are 1, 2, there are others like this, well, metal plugs. And so they were sweating a little on the carving. Well, they generally gave a pass here. That is, all that needs to be done, that is, it's nothing terrible, that is, there are no cracks here. When I unscrewed them, they got out very easily. Well, that is, as I understand it, maybe they were just clamped from the factory not much and after some time they just loosened up a little bit, the head was heating up, cooling down. In short, all that needs to be done is here, by the way, the remains of an old sealant, he has seen it somewhere now, here it is. You just need to clean these plugs yourself, clean the thread and with a sealant, Victor Racy I use, tighten them and nothing will not leak, not poison. Well, and tighten accordingly, because I'm telling you, they unscrewed very easily. And this is White, it was he who marked the places, that is, that raised questions. That is, and so the head is fully functional. Everything is fine with this, so I will immediately answer the question, how much does this repair cost? Where I did it, in the office of Plasma Master, which I did in Kiev on Yakutskaya Street. Yakutskaya is 7, in my opinion, or 14, I don't remember exactly. So, that's all for this, that is, for repairing the surface and for checking the head and that's it. All this cost about 1,600 hryvnias. Well, why approximately? Because well, actually there's something like 1,500, there's like 50 or 570, well, that's something like that. That is, well, I'm rounding up, I'm just saying 1,600 hryvnia. Here, that is, yes, of course it is expensive, but nevertheless you have a guarantee, that is, the head is checked that it already has no cracks guaranteed anywhere, nothing. The head is at the final stage of its assembly, that is, everything is already cut, lapped. Kraft will briefly tell you only that the inlet here, for example, I have not drilled the channel anywhere. The only thing I did was pass the milling cutter. Here the intake was somewhere 28, became 29. That's where you can, for example, notice where the milling cutter has reached, that's where I selected everything. I want to note that there are no steps there anymore. That is, there he was, there were different tides, well, now there is no such thing there. So, since I did not pull out the guides, and the shafts are standard here, that is, there is no special point in boring the inlet further. I wasted the issue. Well, I wasted only because I pulled out the guides for replacement, as I said before. That is, when the guides are removed, that is, it is not particularly difficult to pass the milling channel. I said in the previous video review that you can safely do 26 mm with a milling cutter here, although even 23 hardly passed there. But here I decided without any fanaticism, I just passed 25. Well, there were about 23 or even 22.5. That is, they were such flattened these channels. Well, the bandwidth has certainly increased a little. Here, but again, I repeat, it is worth it and can be done when replacing the guides. That is, they are not there, nothing hinders. Well, everything else is cut, lapped. Once again I will show you this cylinder, on which 4 saddles were replaced and a crack was welded. Well, the saddles are slightly different in quality. Well, it's not a bad quality. That is, not a complete something. Well, let's say you're cutting it's not a BMW, it's clear. But these saddles walk normally. That is, how many times have I already checked, here it is a facet and on the neighboring ones. Well, here they are just, for example, exhaust saddles on foreign cars of these here, well, mostly the Euro automotive industry. That is, there are BMW, Opel, there are Frenchmen. They are red, more of such a reddish hue. Well, apparently they have some kind of heat-resistant steel, but the intake is ordinary. We put everything cut and lapped. It remains to assemble the seals of the L-ring valves. I'm putting it here. From what we have, in principle, excellent oil seals, there were no complaints. The valves are chrome-plated, lapped. Well, I'll bring it closer now. One turned out to be like a new one, cleaned. Well, here they are facets here. Where are they here now? A, to be more or less visible. That's it. The head is also milled, since the gasket here should be ordinary. It is milled, I had to remove about 4/10 here. That is, she was. Well, of course she is, that is, after welding and all the cases, she was a little, well, crooked. Here. Well, in principle, that is, the gasket is thicker than the standard one, so the whole thing is compensated by one another. Before installing the head on top of the block, firstly, the surface of the block, which is milled, is wiped with a dry cloth and solvent in order to degrease it. That is, to fanaticism, degrease the surface there so that it is completely dry. You cannot do this, but the surface should be clean, it should not have any greasy spots, oil residues and, of course, no dust. That is, basically it is degreased so that no dust gets on the surface. That is, I repeat once again, that is, 16 acres have been removed, the surface is clean here. There are also products, well, before that, the carving products, wells have been washed. So, I also want to note that before installing the head on any engine, well, in particular, this is an inline 6, it is not possible to put all the pistons here so that they stand in the middle. That is, 2 pistons are obtained at the lower dead center, and the rest of them are closer to the upper dead center. The crankshaft is placed in such a way that during the subsequent movement, look, I take it with my hand on the first cylinder, for example, now I will show. With the subsequent movement, so that it can be twisted by 60 degrees, that is, these go below and the first 6th fit higher. This is done so that when installing the head and then during the subsequent installation of the camshafts can be rotated freely and see how the system works, that is, whether the camshaft does not wedge, so that the valves are guaranteed not to hit the pistons. Well, then it is simply put, the camshafts are put according to their marks and the crankshaft turns 60 degrees. As for the head itself, the same thing. The head, its surface is degreased, well, the head itself is blown, clean, assembled already, just with valves, well, without shafts. There is such a design that the shafts are placed separately, so it means that before assembling the mounting bolts. Here, in particular, M10 is used. Bolts, the tip of the thread is lubricated with oil with the usual same transmission oil and the cap is lubricated, or rather not the cap, but this part that contacts the washer. In order that when tightening, the force that will be given well, feel the torque wrench, there was an effort to tighten it, and not the friction forces there when it rubs against the washer or along the thread. So I want to note that here I lubricated them, well, about 15 minutes have passed, that is, the rest of the oil just drains off. That is, don't be afraid to do it. Then the bolt itself must be washed dry before this, but the tip of the thread is lubricated with a cap. That is, the excess will drain away. The gasket here should be like this, but it really does not say on it that it is 205, but according to this index, as a person told me, according to this index, if there is a 20 at the end, it means an ordinary gasket, if 30, then this gasket is thicker. And I really measured it, it really is more so thick and even by eye it can be seen that it is fleshy. When assembling such engines, which differ in design in that the head is placed not just on the block, but also on part of the front cover, that is, there is a joint at it. I always apply a very thin small layer of sealant to these places. There are some gaskets, metal packages, for example, for the same 406th, 405th, 9th ZMZ engine, where they have this moment provided by the manufacturer. That is, there are small rubber seals on the gasket, that is, there is a sealant there. But here, too, in principle, that is, they believe, the manufacturer believes that it is possible not to lubricate anything here with a sealant, I repeat again, that is, it is lubricated with a thin layer. Well, that is, what gets on the aluminum part, it's not scary on the lid, that is, in any case, it will squeeze out, well, on the block, that is, there are no channels nearby where the sealant could get. But nevertheless, this will guarantee that oil will not ooze in these places. That is, of course, I say again that some streams will not flow there, but small little fogging will definitely be present for a long time. So, the gasket of the head, so here it is with us now. That is, there is no other way to install it here. Well, in these places I want to notice, I'll just show you a little closer, that is, look, here is this part that is adjacent to the block, that is, here it has additional sealing points like this. Well, in principle, that is, a sealant, in any case, it will not hurt you. So again we install. By the way, these guides are already installed here, I forgot to say, that is, the lock is first degreased and then the guides are inserted so that it is easier to degrease it. I want to note the same way, that is, the gasket is not lubricated with oil, that is, neither transmission nor graphite there, well, nothing. That is, the gasket must be dry. It feels by itself, if you touch it with your finger, it is more or less greasy, but this is already the gasket material itself, and there is no need to lubricate it with anything here. I used to lubricate once, that's when the Ziguli engine was still doing it for a long time, but then I read in Kryllov's book that it was not necessary to do this, since the gasket should be pressed down on a dry surface with a dry surface and so that it would not go anywhere, so that there would be no additional ones, well, nothing there it remained, roughly speaking. After that, the head is installed. So, well, the head is heavy. Here, hold it on top. Now, just a second, I'll grab it with my hands. There's just one to do it. Now wait. I'll take a look. Wait. So, now I'm going to stick it on the guide here. So. He sat on my guide rail. Let it all go, let it go. Now, and here he is supposed to be neat like this. Here is the head. Look at the head, well, unlike other heads there are, well, sometimes people put heads with collectors, but it's inconvenient to install, of course. That is, so roughly speaking, I put the head, especially on the stand, when the engine is standing vertically and you can then assemble it. So look at this here tensioner, or rather, I have not been looking for a shoe before, it is a disposable clamp, that is, I twisted it, attached a chain to it so that I don't get it, of course, you can get it that way, but these are additional worries. That is, then this yoke, it calmly, well, breaks, pulls out and the chain comes out. But now it does not interfere with any installation, nothing. Also, the head is well assembled. By the way, here are the plugs I was talking about, they are on the sealant. Now, perhaps the most important stage of assembly is tightening the head. That is, the assembly stage with the head begins from the moment of simply tightening the bolt into its shaft, that is, when it enters its seat, until the moment of tightening. So, look, I'm going to turn the camera now. So, I also want to answer the question, I almost forgot, I once told you in other videos, well, I'll repeat myself here. That is, the instructions of the factory. In principle, on all modern engines, and this is also no exception, it requires replacing the bolts of both the head and even the bolts at the lugs, that is, the crankshaft bed, connecting rods. Not at all, but it happens. That is, basically, that is, fasteners need to be changed. And the tightening is done there by force, well, that is, there is not some initial small effort, then a turn there is like 90 plus 90 degrees or whatever it is for 120, well, something like that, there is a different prescription. So, I want to note that I do not recommend anyone to pull any heads with angles, not only heads, even a hook. Because there have been many cases, I have been a personal witness of the fact that the bolts were broken. Well, they broke off so that you could then remove its head and unscrew it. And if it breaks off somewhere down in the block, you can't do that. This is done from the factory, when the block is freshly made, a new bolt is new, that is, there is an automatic machine. I twist it there, well, maybe not at all of the factory, but basically, that is, on the conveyor there, the machine twists all these bolts and a new bolt is guaranteed, a new thread in the shaft head, that is, it is guaranteed to turn by a certain number of degrees, that is, it gets the necessary effort. In subsequent repairs, when removing the head and mounting, and that's it, you only need to pull it with an effort in kilograms. They don't do this in production because it takes longer on the conveyor. That is, so on the conveyor, roughly speaking, the head has become, the machine with its corners is jick, that is, the same person standing, that is, he wrapped, everything, went. And kilograms, that is, it needs to be pulled up slowly, to hear when he clicks the key there, well, who has what key? Well, that is, more time is spent on it. Therefore, I leave the old bolts, but if they, of course, do not have any damage on the thread. Now look. One of the important parameters. Usually on the same lotta, for example. When I insert the bolts, I then take an electric screwdriver with a head. I just twist them all the way there. Well, I put the smallest effort, he twists them so as not to waste time on it. In this situation, the peculiarity of the assembly of this design, that is, you can do this here, you can generally tighten them here in 2 steps. It is possible, of course, but since the head and block are 6-cylinder, that is, it is relatively long, that is, its width. It turns out that if you sharply, say, tighten even with a small effort some middle 2 bolts, then the head will acquire a lot of tension, that is, in the middle, that is, the gasket should be slightly doused. This will cause additional deformation of the entire structure. I mean, well, someone thinks it's acceptable, that is, what's so scary about that? I think this is absolutely unacceptable. And therefore, when twisting, I will now manually twist them, besides, they twist very small here, look, I'm just for you now. I have already shown in the disassembly video. That is, there it is, the bolt, it twists about 15 millimeters, probably into a block, that is, it doesn't go in there that much. I twist them manually. After I have screwed the bolts with my hands all the way to the end, a tightening is performed. The final tightening force is here. M10 bolts and a cast iron block are used here. So the final tightening force according to the table is, well, roughly according to the passport for such threaded connections. It doesn't matter what kind of BMW or Volkswagen engine. That is, another cast iron block, a bolt M10 with a thread, well, that's about a step, that is, there is 125, well, not 125, that is, somewhere standard there is 1.5, 175 within these limits. So according to the table, the final effort goes here 8 and 3, 8 and 6 kilograms. That is, from 8 and 3 to 8 and 6. I usually do 8 and 5, already checked. That is, this is the average, normal. The whole process of tightening breaks down, well, it is suggested that you can do it in 2 stages, that is, for example, there are 4 kilograms and 8 and 5. But I usually prefer to do especially on a long head in 3 stages to break it up. So, what is the peculiarity? So, since I want to remind you, there are 14 bolts here, that is, they do not have a block of 2 middle ones, like on a Lada, for example, there are 10 and there are a couple of bolts that stand in the middle. There is no such thing here. So, first we put the effort at 2.5 kilograms. Here are 2.5 kilograms. It is usually possible to tighten, well, that is, if it has an even number, that is, not odd, then for example, there are 10 bolts on the Lada, that is, 5. That is, from the middle it goes in a spiral, that is, 1, 2, there is a third, fourth, then you go to the 5th, 6th, and so on. In principle, there is still a tightening going on, that is, let's say the first, second tightened, then one on one side and cruciform on the other side. That is, 1, 1. That is, he says this in principle, there is no big fundamental difference in that. Now what I was talking about, but I put an effort of 2.5 kilograms. That is, here I am, well, I dragged them there by hand. Here, by the way, I want to note, that is, the head slightly asked them to tighten even without much effort. It's in the middle, that is, to them. That is, the main thing here is not to rush and not to reform the gasket. That is, here I slightly tightened 4 bolts, for example, neither the key clicked, nothing. And here are some of these bolts that I turn with my hand. That is, the head sits down a little in place. I understand there is a small difference, someone can say that there is something to think about, it does not deform from this. But nevertheless, that is, look here. Now in more detail, that is, here we are delaying. Here I clicked once, right? Then I clicked crosswise. Next we go clicked. These are the middle bolts. Now look further. We're moving on. There is basically no difference from which to start. There is a puff. I specifically want to show it all to draw your attention. So, it's me. Yes, I tightened it up. Here it is. Specially show it to pay attention to the following. Here I am gradually approaching the tap. Well, here they are, I just didn't twist them with my hand, that is, they didn't get there a little bit. So, well, it's the same here. I'll plug it in now. Oh. So. It's the same here. Oh. So. And the last bolt. Now here it is. So I went through 2.5, and now we are checking the middle bolts that we tightened before. See, I saw him a little bit, literally a little bit, but he trusted me. See, a little bit. Well, the difference is small, but on some engines they turn much more. But here it literally reaches a couple of degrees. But there are engines on which it is necessary to turn almost 50 or 60 degrees there. See, a little bit he trusted. It's already pulling up, that is, there is no such fundamental difference. You see, once, a little bit I'm turning, look, up literally a little bit. This indicates that the head has settled into place and already has a uniform compression. Right now, you see, she has already sat down evenly, she has already squeezed, and the gasket is the initial moment. If you don't do this, you see, this bolt is no longer about, the engine is a little skewed here. Here is the extreme already in principle, these here they do not go. Now I'll put it so that it can be seen in the camera. That is, oh, this one is a little bit, well, literally here, well, 2 or 3 degrees, he turned around. That is, during the initial tightening, it is important to pass twice, because initially tightening the middle bolts, they roughly perceive the load from the entire head on themselves, and then, when those that stand on the edges reach, the middle turns out to be more weakened. And if from such a moment, that is, it passed once and then immediately you pull the second time with the next effort, well, you risk deforming the head a little. That is, you see, everything, they don't drag on any further. Here they are, here. Now you can continue to bet. That is, we had 2.5 kilograms. Next, it means we have the final 8 and 5, I put here, for example, now I'll say, well, I put 6 kilograms. Well, somewhere not even 6, but 6.1. I just have it marked on the key. So. And the same thing is cruciform, that is, opposite each other. Here I am turning it a little bit. Oh, you see. So you can start with this. There is. There is. there is. So on, too, according to the tightening moments. By the way, that's what I have to say. I said at the beginning of the video. That's right. Well, I just didn't take into account the moment a little bit, since I said that there are 14 bolts here, that is, there are still 7 bolts, that is, there are 2 medium bolts. But in any case, that is, the scheme does not change. That is, I said 14, that is, well, thinking that automatically, since it is an even number. And now, again, with the same effort, we check 6 and 1. See, a little bit he trusted. Well, literally here. Literally a couple of degrees, but it has to be done. This one is already, these are already standing, that is, the middle is here. Well, we can assume that it did not rotate in principle. Here's a look further. That is, everything is delayed. Although I'm looking at the efforts now, well, this, too, in principle, can be considered that he has not gone anywhere. Well, all the others, that is, I already checked them, I just know that the end bolts do not relax. Yes, that's the only thing I forgot to say, that crisscross, but from this, as they say, the sum will not change from changing the places of the terms. That's the main thing, that is, you start from the middle and go. In this case, it is not essential. It is more difficult to pull a little, well, not more difficult, but the heads that have 8 bolts, that is, 2 bolts each. Like in a lecture. There, of course, it is necessary, that is, let's say it is more jewelry to do it. So now we are putting the final effort, but the only thing I looked at was a puff, a puff. Here I will put the minimum. No, wait, 8 and 3. I'll put 8 and 4. That is, both 8 and 5 pull. Here, be sure to look, that is, if with some effort you feel that, well, you can twist, but the key does not click, that is, the force is constant, then the bolt floats. So it is necessary to make less effort. Well, here it should be, there should be 8 and 4. Look here. Here, it's fine. That is, there is no need to pull more here. Well, everyone is clacking. So, let's go further. And I want to note that I turn the key a little. That is, there can be no 90 degrees for the entire time that I have tightened, in any way. So here we go. The effort is stable. So now we check the middle. Even after such efforts, she does not go anywhere. Usually, according to some technical regulations, in some manuals it is suggested to check the tightening forces after a certain time, well, say an hour. But based on practice, I can say with confidence that on more or less modern gaskets, that is, although it is not a metal package, that is, especially on metal packages, but it is not a metal package, but still it is not necessary to check even on such gaskets in principle. Here it is also written in some other manuals that you need to warm up the engine and tighten it to a hot one. That is, well, understand correctly, these are all remnants of the past, when they could normally either process the surface or just make high-quality bolts. Therefore, I had to be sophisticated with some such things. That is, this puff is completely enough for the head to go for a very long time in the future, well, that is, how much resource there will be enough for him and there will be no problems at the same time. Also, it is necessary not to forget to tighten the M6 that are in front, but I did not tighten them, well, rather, I did not tighten them right now, because these are bolts, well, rather so safety, that is, they do not even need to be tightened there. Although there are efforts there in the manual, there is something 0.8 kilograms in my opinion, or if I'm not mistaken, well, we need to look. Well, these are the M6 in principle, that is, roughly speaking, they do not affect anything bolts. I also want to explain the following, or rather not to explain, but to focus on this, because it is very important. Here are the bolts that I tightened here, I put the knots 8 and 4. Well, that is, 8 and 3, 8 and 6, well, I've put 8 and 4 on average. Usually people think how. That's the majority, that is, the more I tighten, so that the bail is tighter, then it will be better. So in fact it is not so. With a certain force, when a bolt, well, or a stud, nut, that is, well, in particular, we are talking about a fence, that is, it enters the surface, it tightens with a certain force. That is, it strains the bolt body itself to break, well, to pull, the thread and the surface of the head are strained, that is, what goes with the block and there is a certain force to press one another. If you tighten this bolt, tighten it with some kind of greater effort, well, let's say take at least 10 kilograms there, some bolts may break, that is, well, they just burst themselves. That is, it does not break, the thread breaks, and the bolt itself bursts. These are more common cases. And so, in principle, most of the bolts on the heads are designed, that is, so that the thread in the block does not break, namely, the bolt itself breaks. That is, if you over-tighten and the bolt, say, does not break, but it will have a very large force, then in the future when heated, that is, since it would experience deformation more than it can withstand, well, rather not more, but outside its working, say, range, then in the future, when working, when heated, it can, well, that is, when heated, it will heat up and it will stretch out and as a result of this, a clamp will be obtained, that is, it will create less even than it can clamp. That is, there is a certain operating range with the force that the bolt is clamped. We need to withstand it. That is, it's very simple here, too. I've seen such cases when people tighten it so that it's tighter and then after a while they break the gasket, disassemble it and it turns out that when you unscrew, the bolts are not tightened much. Well, that is, one is tightened normally, and the second is somehow so, well, easily unscrewed. And the most important thing is that the surfaces on the head block are basically flat. That is, well, as if it should not pierce the gasket, but some part is weakened and a rush occurs. That is, even well, that is, it turns out that it does not even punch the gasket, but just well, not the density between the connection, that is, insufficient clamping forces. Therefore, it is important to remember this and do it according to the regulations, according to the prescribed table. That is, more does not mean better. I have already installed the exhaust shaft, the intake shaft should be installed now. I want to draw your attention to the following, that is, according to the beds, since they are in principle absolutely identical to each other, pay attention to the following. Here you can see, for example, the letter A on the bugles everywhere. Here I will become so that it would be easier to show A and 1 and 2. Here they are, well, there and so on. And most importantly, there is also a letter A on the shaft itself. This is a native exhaust shaft. I wanted to put the intake shaft here initially, having reworked it well, having modified it a little and so that it becomes here. But later I gave up on this idea, because there are native exhaust manifolds here, they have this shape, that is, this is one and the second exactly the same. And I want to immediately notice what it means by the passport. I did not say that on these shafts, well, for example, the intake, right? The intake has 250 degrees. That is, a person, not even one person in the comments dumped the information that 250 degrees of intake, and the output is 228. Well, in short, roughly speaking, 230 if it's already completely rounded up like this. So, the exhaust shaft is narrow phase, with a phase of about 230. It works fine with such a crushed collector. There's basically no difference. There you can generally make, roughly speaking, such a tube immediately drain. Well, like draining into one pipe. If you put a camshaft with a phase of even 250, then at low speeds, since the collector is very crushed, the engine can give, and more precisely cannot, but it will give less power. Because the collector will not provide proper purging and proper movement of exhaust gases. That's why I left the regular collector. That is, the collector, camshaft left a regular one. So look, now for the intake. Here I ask you to pay your attention to E, and the camshaft is also written here E. Well, in principle, if you confuse the bed with the camshaft, I basically don't know that, well, theoretically nothing should be. All these dimensions are the same everywhere, that is, everything should rotate. But nevertheless, if it has already been noted, that is, it was so during assembly, especially when I was disassembling this engine, I noticed, usually on Japanese engines, and now on some European ones, that is, it is mainly marked as in or the letter I, this is the intake shaft, and the letter E or EX marks the exhaust shaft. Here it was the opposite, that is, the release. This is A, the intake. This is E, that's why I remember this difference. Well, in principle, that is, I don't think that anything will change here if you mix up the bed. Well, in principle, it's better not to do this. Next. Compensators. Compensators are laid in the bed here from the side of the valves and put it so that the compensators do not fall out. Well, it's a little laborious if you do it by car, that is, let's say, it's not very convenient. But since it's not by car, it will be fine for me in principle. Compensators are eine here. Here I put some, so a set. The kit remained. Compensators should be new here. I want to note that the compensators are in a strained state, well, that is, well, as in a strained state, I mean in a state completely that this rod is sunk there, that is, they are completely compressed, that is, they must be filled with oil and choose their own working position. I want to note that before, if you put old hydraulic compensators, it is often 50-50. It happens that you put compensators and the engine works normally, and you put the other one and turn it, that is, there is no compression. That is, before installing the old compensator, it is necessary. In general, it is necessary. That is, to put compensators with such repairs, it is necessary to put a new one, regardless of how long the old ones have passed. That is, if you assemble it, you will have 1 or 2 put stuck of it, that is, I'm disassembling the whole system again. Therefore, it is necessary to put a new one. But if you have already left the old compensators, then before their installation they need to be clamped in a vise with this hole here, where the oil is supplied, with the hole down. Well, of course, lay an aluminum or copper spacer of some kind on the side of the contact with the camshaft and take some, preferably, of course, a metal hot steel, such as a cube or a rod, so that it rests against this here rod, piglet. And squeeze it in a vise. That is, specially down the hole, so that the old oil flows out, it needs to be squeezed until it stops. And the procedure here needs to be done a couple of times until he starts walking there easily. Here they are actually drowned, they don't even walk here. Well, this is a new compensator. Therefore, the old ones must necessarily be pitted. Dismantling the bed, well, personally, I do as follows, that is, I turn the engine 90 degrees down, so that it's just convenient for me to do it all. Now look, here it is, so here it is. I have already laid all the compensators here, that is, I repeat, from the reverse side, from the camshaft side there are limiters, they cannot be inserted. So, now what am I doing? Well, that is, if you turn it over, roughly speaking, the compensators will all fall out. That is, they need to be held. Well, it's complicated. Well, how difficult, that is, not very convenient. Well, now you can use it. Oh no, stop. That's not where I put it. And now you can safely put him here on his seat. I want to note that I have now put it on, now we are lifting it. Well, here's the bed, she just didn't quite sit down on the guide. In a calm state, well, or rather in the zero position, I'll even show you now. I want to note that the bed has become completely in its place. But there's literally a small gap there, but it's on the guides that he didn't fully sit down. That is, everywhere in its entire landing place. Well, he sat down. At the same time, the compensators are in zero, well, that is, in the very initial state. And in some there is even a small gap. Here he is a little gap. I want to note that I personally know of one case when a person assembling such a head did not bleed the compensators, and when installing the camshaft, he began to tighten and the camshaft broke in half. That is, the compensator, that is, he put the bed, he apparently did not have it, it became somehow skewed, well, because the compensator was revealed. Well, that is, and then I press it with my hand, that is, it does not go any further. Plus, he also put the camshaft, began to tighten, and at some point, that is, the spring compressed, that is, there is a valve stroke, plus the fact that the compensator was extended by a couple of millimeters and broke the camshaft. Therefore, it is important to pay attention to this when assembling. Further assembly of the camshaft is carried out in principle easily, but there is also a small feature of its own. Well, before that, the surfaces from the oil pan are lubricated, right? The most important thing in this is that, for example, on a 4-cylinder engine there is a camshaft. When installed, there is only one cylinder with a large voltage. Well, roughly speaking, one cam will be on the first one, it will stand there in one direction, on the second in the other, on the third up, and only on the fourth it will look down. Well, or on some other cylinder, that is, depending on how to turn it. Here, on the inline 6, there will no longer be such a position, that is, through 6 cylinders, and in any case, it will strain several pushers at once. So in order to put it more or less adequately, now we will try to show, it is desirable to put it in such a way that, for example, the 6th and 1st kolachki, as well as the 2nd and 5th have less tension, well, they prove less pressure on the pusher so that the main pressure goes on some 3rd or rather 4th or 3rd their cylinders. So now we'll try. Well, for example, here it makes no difference, for example, in order to tighten it, start from the middle. Because if you start pulling on one side of it, that is, you risk skewing it a lot, or, let's say, tightening it all the way here, and there will be a long distance here. If you pull it up like this, then you risk breaking it too, or at least damaging the thread, that is, or this very hook that tightens it. But again, before assembling, be sure to lubricate the surfaces with oil. In principle, do not regret the oil here, well, that is, what to him. All the excess will drain away, and what is necessary for installation will remain. I also want to note one small design feature. Here it is a bugle E1, so it has an offset. These are the holes, they are made with an offset in one direction. That is, for example, if you take some other hooks, there is a 6th one, for example, or all the others, that is, they have a hole in the middle and you can install such a hook, that is, roughly speaking, either in one position, or turn it 180 degrees in another position. So in order not to confuse in what position it is placed, the first bugle is made with an offset and you need to look at the inscriptions, that is, here is how it is written here, for example, here on the same side the inscriptions should be on all the other bugles. That is, here he is put here and it turns out that one looks at me the inscription is exactly the same, we arrange and scatter all the rest of the mogul 1 2 3 4 5 6, that is, at me. Because it can be put in principle and vice versa. Here, that is, he will stand. Another plus, of course, there is a small displacement along the groove. But of course you can't show it like that. That is, when you insert it just like that, well, it's imperceptible to the eye, and so everything becomes clear right away. Here they are, the hooks are installed. That is, again, I want to definitely notice. That is, on the one hand, you get a shaft that almost stands perfectly, that is, you can screw and bait the nuts well. On the other hand, there is not even a special place here, well, that is, if you play like that is, especially. That is, either on the one hand to bait, or on the other hand. But you need to start baiting nuts from the middle, for example. That is, roughly speaking, once, twice, I baited a nut here, well, it will not profit here. We'll get her here like this. Well, you can, so as not to hold it in your hands, it still does not interfere with twisting. So, the most important thing is to twist them a little bit. You see, the thread is fenced here, you can bait the next nut. That is, you never need to twist them. Yeah, it hasn't made much money yet. Alright, that is, it is never necessary to twist immediately to the maximum. You can already see, there's a shaft here. I'm going to turn it off a little bit now. In principle, he sat down perfectly at all, that is, in his seat. And here it does not reach. That is, you need it. And first of all, you always twist those hooks that. The cams of which look at the pusher, that is, they exert pressure directly on it. Well, now you can cut this one a little bit. Gradually twist them evenly. Now you can bait and tighten the rest so that the shaft, that is, from this side the shaft is already as you can see, that is, the hooks are sitting normally, even without puffs, and on the other hand they still require a creative approach. Here, for example. The main thing is not to delay everything at the same time. Well, that is, it's more COVID than any one bugle right up to the stop. In any case, do not pull it. Right here, you can already see they have weakened, these are the hooks. Everything, the shaft, in principle, is already sitting in place. Here he is the average one left. And these can already be twisted. Well, a little bit, you see. So, well, in principle, everything is baited here, you can tighten it. It means it's being delayed. This thread is M7, it is tightened with effort. If I'm not mistaken, somewhere either 1 and 6 or 1 and 8 kilograms. But the fact is that my torque wrench starts with 2 there, somewhere 1 and 9 at least. There is already a margin of error. That is, I do such things, although they are required by the instructions to tighten them strictly with effort, but I tighten them by hand, roughly speaking without fanaticism, that is. In any case, there are a lot of them here, and again, you don't need to drag them, pull them so that more of this is not necessary. That's quite enough.
Хватит.
That's it, the shaft fits perfectly.
Сидит отлично.
Well, now the most important thing is a test for its repair is suitable, or rather its operability, so here I have something the key does not climb much. In general, we will put it on the other side. Please, everything is spinning calmly. That's why I said before that the crankshaft should have such a position that the pistons are not at the top dead center, so that you can rotate the camshaft and at the same time that everything is work. So, I want to note right away that some people may have a question, that is, will the valves be damaged? That is, it means but one shaft, I turn them arbitrarily, that is, two valves will open on one side and on the other for maximum lift, will not be damaged. Firstly, the lift is small here. Secondly, the most important thing is that the compensators are sagged, and since they are sagged, that is, the camshaft turns out when it rotates, it passes some moment, that is, well, roughly speaking, idle, and then the valve is already pressed. That is, the valve turns out to have a phase already, and the most important thing is that the lift becomes less by a couple of millimeters there. Therefore, in any case, the valves will not be damaged. And now I'm going to show you this. And now in more detail. Look, for example, let's take the fourth cylinder. There they are, you see, the cams are pointing down, that is, well, in fact, they now have the maximum valve lift. We look from here. Now I'm sorry, I forgot my flashlight at home today. Well, there they are, it can be seen that in general the valves are open. Great, so now look, we take for example, well, the first cylinder, here it is, by the way, I have now put it in the upper dead point. That is, the first cylinder is standing in the overlap, and the sixth is the stroke, the working stroke of ignition. Well, look. Now we will try. Well, please, look, it's certainly not good to see here, but the valve on the right is slightly ajar, which is closed on the left. There he is. Well, that is, one compensator, roughly speaking, sat down a little more, the other a little less. For example, the second cylinder, and here he is, too, well, not quite, well, there's a little bit compressed. They are both closed. That is, it says that. Well, valves, I say, compensators will be filled with oil when the engine is running and everything will reach its operating range, that is, its operating level. Well, in this case, that is, the phase turns out to be narrow, and when the compensators are empty, it looks like this. Now, in principle, the final stage of assembly is to combine all the labels and assemble the valve timing mechanism. I just want to show that I have previously put both camshafts in the upper dead center, that is, a worker is going into the sixth cylinder. So well, that is, ignition in this case, there is a purge. There are shafts, a chain. By the way, I haven't disconnected the chain yet, well, I haven't removed it from someone. I just want to demonstrate. That is, this operation on this engine is performed calmly, accurately, without a measuring tool. I just want to demonstrate that I drove the piston in the first sixth to the upper dead center, and now we will check the label. Does the label match? There it is from, and it is title on the pulley. That is, whether one corresponds to the other. Now, well, look, that is, I put an indicator here as usual. Now, just a second, I'll take it so that it's convenient for me. Well, I twist it in one direction, that is, it went down. Now look, I twist it in the other direction, and it reaches some point, then it goes down again. And so we catch up with him back. Here you see the division by micrometer. This will be his top dead center. Let's see what ours shows us. Well, in general, you can notice that there is the slightest discrepancy between the tide and the risk from. That is, roughly speaking, the risk is between, that is, well, the label is between the risk and the letter T, but in principle, the error, I want to note that the scale is big here. The error is, in principle, minimal, that is, it is the error of a well-defined instrument, that is, the entire structure. The diameter is large and in fact the label is executed correctly. Look, I have a lot of it there now. So I brought it back a little bit, put it on. That is, our indicator has shifted 5 microns especially there. Well, that is, in principle, all the labels correspond to reality. Well, that is, in principle, you cannot check this case on your BMW. Well, here it is a label. Well, that is, you twist it a couple of times, well, literally. Well, now he's standing on the label. That is, the label, I say, that is, the error of the measuring instrument all corresponds to one another. Well, the final part of the assembly is the combination of all the stars, labels, and so on. He's the yoke I've already pulled out. The crankshaft I have is at the top dead center, the camshafts are also flat in advance. I will show you this in addition now. Of all the stars, that is, well, I'm the old stars that were here, stood, I washed them. I want to pay attention, there is even a mark on it, that is, such a more rectangular, well, pale part is where the small star was adjacent, and on this side it is the part that was adjacent to the camshaft along the flange. That's how I'll put them. Accordingly, these stars are similarly assembled in the same way. The mechanism is assembled easily, there is no tension device itself, it is placed at the end. Everything, I hope, will be more or less visible already so that it is somehow clear. Well, that is, here it is the surface that adjoined the camshaft on this side of the asterisk. I insert it here approximately. That is, now we will correct it. That is, it costs about. But it is clear that she does not have much adjustment. Now we will fix this body. Let's say we check it on the tooth whether it is necessary to put it on the tooth. Let's say forward. There is also a rubber damper here, which stretches a little. And now I want to note, here you are, there is an adjustment approximately in the middle here it is. Also, now I'm straining my shoe with my finger, for example, that is, it can be seen that about in the middle. Next, this plastic sedative is installed here, which partially calms the large chain and the small chain. It is installed here. When attaching it, one very long M6 is used, which also goes there to the very bottom. Well, two short ones with torques with a head, so that they do not interfere with the chain in the future. That is, I want to note again, do you see how the chain sits? That is, it is a rubber damper, which additionally tightens it a little. Well, and also respond thereby preventing increased engine noise. More precisely, not the engine, but in particular the gas distribution mechanism. Here we pull up. Here they are 6, there is no need to tighten them too much. Here they are. So, now this hydraulic tensioner of the intermediate chain is being installed. That is, it is attached in only 4 places, well, that is, 3 from the top and 1 long from the bottom. That is, it is inserted here. This and more precisely this is his body, and the workpiece itself is done the same way. There's already an ordinary M6, I mean with ordinary heads, right? I insert them. Then it drags on. I want to note that it is best to tighten the upper bolts first, that is, so that it is pressed down, and then this lower one. That is, in order not to create any unnecessary additional stresses there. Also tighten his TM6 with a moderate effort to pull them off. It's better to drag him over, it's better he won't stand from this. Further and further. Next, the spring of the hydraulic tensioner itself is inserted. I want to notice. That is, I did it a little, well, I didn't wash it more precisely, I just wiped it, blew it, that is, it was clean. By the way, he's here like this, he should stand so that this part of the edge is out, if I'm not mistaken. Now we can easily check it. Well, yes, because on this side there is an aluminum limiter. I want to note, that is, on this side, it is even a little brilliantly visible that the chain of the body. There is a chain limiter on this side. Well, in principle, he is not needed, it is not cold or hot here, but the Germans have already done it. Well, let it be so. It can and should be lubricated before final installation. At least it won't make him any worse. He's going to put it up here for now. Next, you need to remember to put this flag here. This is under the phase sensor, which stands here in the head. So I want to notice the design feature you have. Look, I think it will be seen here that there is, well, such blackening on it, that is, from elliptical, well, from rectangular holes of the asterisk. How was it with the adjustment? I want to notice, M7 bolts are standing here, so I insert it here, this one is M7, so here it is. I want to note that he does not stagger left and right. This suggests that when it stands on the camshaft, it has some kind of its own stroke, but if you twist, for example, this one here is 7 now a little bit. Now, if I tighten at least one bolt, that is, I will not literally make it to the end, that is, he does not have a move here. But the small backlash that exists, that is, when they come in, let there be 4 bolts, that is, there will not be this move. What is the peculiarity? The peculiarity is that, in fact, this is the flag, it goes when adjusting together with the camshaft. That is, the camshaft, here it has its upper dead center and has the position of this flag here. They somehow twisted the gears, became for the drive and that's it. Because this is an important moment, that is, the position of this cam and the position of the camshaft clearly correspond. By the way, I want to note that there is a groove here and a stamping here, that is, you will not confuse it upside down. I once did, my father and I developed an adjustable star on a Lada, or rather on a Chevrolet Niva. And this is the moment with the position of the phase sensor, I tried to take into account so that it also had its constant position. People even wrote to me, that is, why is it necessary? That is, but here it is made from the factory like this. That is, that it has a clear position and a phase sensor with an asterisk, this flag here, it does not shift. Well, there's a sensor, there's just a flag. Well, there is not a sensor, but such as a magnet. Next, the stars are installed, but I have already pre-installed them along with the chain. Here they are standing here, they have them, I put them in exactly the same way. Look, if you look at this star here, you will see large stripes like this in the offspring here. Well, that is, she stood on this big star, but this was not noticed here. Well, that is, it was an intake, it was an outlet, that is, that's how it stood. So, come on, help me stock it up. This operation is simple, well, of course you can do it alone, but it's better to do it together. No, wait, let me put on a chain and you and the chain will put it there. So. Well, look, I'm sticking it all in here. Now, just a second. Okay, let go. Well, look, everything is standing here, in principle it's fine, only it's the only thing that needs to be tweaked a little. Now I'm going to put him on, that is, so that he becomes clearly in his position. That is, well, I just initially put it a little crooked. Look here. Here he is already here, he has become approximately his position. That is, well, the tensioner pulls it accordingly. The structure is assembled, I will only tighten it. Tightening of the entire system in particular, these here are the adjustment meters, now these here need a little bit of it. So I just slightly corrected this flag with the sensor, and that's it. So the tightening of all these adjustment bolts is being made. That is, first we need to bait them, of course, so that they are all in their places, but it is tightened, and they are tightened in a stretched position, that is, you need to put a tensioner before that. If for some reason you forgot to put the tensioner on, or hurried, or tightened it as it is, then when you stretch the chain, after you put it on, it is in motion, of course, hydraulically stretched and the force creates normal, but for the initial moment to expose the entire engine, there is enough force of the standard spring. That is, if you tighten these stars without installing a tensioner, then when you install the tensioner and chain tensioner, the sprocket will turn back a little, or rather back, because the chain will tighten, that is, all the backlash will get out, everything will whiten and the sprocket will turn back. Accordingly, if the entire system is tightened, the entire system will turn back, and the accuracy of the adjustment is not visible. Then, at the very last moment, a hydraulic tensioner is installed. Again, it can and should be lubricated, at least it will not hurt to lubricate it. Well, the only thing right now is that we are only strong. It will be clearly visible. Here it is put and tightened. There is a sealing aluminum washer here. That's it, here it is perfectly tightened here. Not really. He did not quite show where and what, but it is also not necessary to tighten it here with a strong big fanaticism. The whole system basically has a stretch. And after that, the system, I want to draw your attention, that is, it is stretched, there is a shaft at the top dead center. But before tightening the whole system, I want to draw your attention to the following point. So, look, there are shafts. Now we will check their installation. So, to begin with, that is, before taking a puff, we look at it from there. That is, it is fine. Now at least the stars and... Well, that is, they are not tightened yet, but look, I screwed 4 bolts in here, now. Well, you see, there is no backlash as such here. Well, there is literally half a millimeter, maybe some small backlash is already considered an engine, that is, but it is within the margin of error. That is, this tail itself, it has a fixed camshaft position. Next, we look at the installation of shafts. Here you are. In general, it is visible, you can do it by eye. Here, look at the shafts, for example. That is, one must be parallel to the other. Right? But, well, here, for example, it is clear that it is not quite parallel, but this one is a little late. And now we will calmly bring it out. And we deduce the error. So, I want to draw your attention, that is, the main shaft is the exhaust here, the initial drive of the entire system goes to it. Therefore, we start with him. Well, he's not exactly parallel right now. Now wait, me. Just to make me comfortable, it needs to be a little bit forward. Hand it over. Come on, it's going to be tight. Oh, stop. No, it's a lot. A little bit back, literally 2 kopecks. No, it's a lot, give it a little bit. That's about his position. So now we will check it again. So now look. Let's go back. So, well, go ahead more precisely, come on. Oh, stop. Stop. Give him a little literally in the ass. This is all of course made stop much easier. Look, here it stands normally and here it stands normally. He let go of everything. Now let's check our mark at the crankshaft if anything has gone wrong there. No, as you can see, it didn't go wrong. That is, in this position, the whole system is delayed. Again, in order not to break and not to knock down the puff, or rather not to puff, I say not to knock down the setting. The system is tightening up here. At first, you see, I can be said to be dragging out completely without power. Wait, then it will hold. That is, I pull it up without effort, just roughly speaking, I bring it up like a marathon. So now slowly. Again, the tightening is done from, well, at the beginning from the main shaft, well, say, to which the drive goes from the chain and tighten. At first I tighten a little bit, that is, well, here again there are 7 pits here you can see the regular routine efforts, but nevertheless. Here, by the way, they were tightened very tightly when I was disassembling. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. There is no need to delay further here. Now the second shaft is tightened in a similar way. That is, I first tighten, well, that is, at first just a little bit, then I feel a little more with my hand. And the final stage of tightening. Now we are. After all the operations, you need to check the rotatability, well, that is, how everything turns and whether everything returns to its place. But the way I look at it now, we'll have to readjust it. Now. It was possible to twist it. And now we'll see, and maybe we won't have to, maybe. Well, that is, everything rotates calmly. So, and now we are. By the way, YouTube, you can put it at any top point. That is, it is not necessary that there be exactly the first and exactly the sixth cylinder, that is, they do not matter. Here it is our OT, we put it on and see if the adjustment has gone wrong. Come on, let's take a look. Here it is our from. So she got a little lost, that is, it was necessary to double him. This is as part of the adjustment. That is, it was necessary to crank it and check it. Now let's try to adjust it. But it's a little easier here, that is, you can only dissolve the primary shaft and the whole system will turn around, it should turn around. So now we check again, that is, we make a couple of turns to our engine. So, where is our from? I missed it. Well, okay, I missed it, so it doesn't matter. We'll find him a second time. Here it is. That's it. Let's see. Another thing. Now I'll show you. Well, you see, that is, it was necessary to crank it once, here, but it's not scary. That is, the chain is still stretched. Here it is ours from now we take it, I disassembled another barbell, it's just more convenient for us to climb, anyway I didn't work with it, it's old. Well, look. That's it. Actually, the entire hair adjustment is finished. Of course, if there was a ruler, it would be even easier to do it, faster more precisely, yes, they were rolling correctly, that is, faster. Well, so, it's quite normal. Everything else is less complicated. The assembly of the engine is slowly nearing the final, but I will only show that I have put various little things, that is, well, I did not show how I will leave these pipes here, the thermostat, which was not there, there is a front cover and a collector. That is, these are the collectors again. That is, I emphasize that they very much limit the release possibilities, but, unfortunately, that is, for this camshaft, in principle, it is quite normal. Also, I did not put the bracket under the air conditioner compressor, since the person does not plan to do this yet, that is, he still has the whole system not working. Well, there is still a need to repair it partially, so I did not collect it. Well, all these little things are clear enough. So, the only thing that remains of such an important and interesting thing to put on the engine is a bracket for an oil filter or an oil filter housing, or a chandelier, as it is popularly called in different ways. The design, that is, I have already said in previous videos, I do not like with this filter, which is inserted separately, but nevertheless it is done that way. So I have 2 of them. In general, for the first time my attention was drawn to this case by my friend from Kaluga, his name is Dima. He also drives a BMW. So the difference is that, well, this is from an old engine that was killed, this is again. Well, that is, he seems to look even less dull. Because I had to fill this one with acid, well, like acid, that is, with detergent. Well, that is, of course, it can be cleaned and polished there, but it will not work better from this. But, then, what is the difference? They are slightly different, despite the fact that they basically seem to be the same and interchangeable. So well, for example, you can immediately see that there is a certain shut-off valve here, it is not present here. But in this case it is not so important. And, by the way, the gasket that I have under it goes, that is, it goes through the catalog here to this, well, this candelabrum. In principle, it fits here, that is, there is no special difference. But, then, Dima immediately told me that these cars have such a disease, well, that is, with this bracket, with this chandelier. That is, two diseases. The first is that the oil is flowing, and oozing, sweating is this mating surface that is adjacent to the block, which will be discussed later, and they sometimes have these plugs flowing. I want to draw your attention to the fact that on this bracket they are twisted here, that is, tightened, and that's it. Here, the design is such that here it is a plug, a rubber ring is put on it, which, of course, has already hardened for a long time. It is inserted there and then this locking ring is inserted here. Moreover, in order for all this whole system to work normally, that is, you heat it there, insert a ring and then under oil pressure, that is, you have to pull up a little bit with pliers so that it rests or it then comes out by itself. And so, well, over time they get tanned, these rings. In principle, you can even assemble the old ones with a sealant, smear them with vitya and raise. This, in principle, should not flow. But if there is a choice of two brackets, then why specify two housings, then why not put one that is guaranteed to stand normally? So this was the first, or rather, the second moment. And as for this leak here, so I think the problem here is that this bracket itself, among other things, also performs a role, various attachments are sitting on it here, but I don't remember exactly what type of generator. Here, everything else there is a power steering, everything that can be. And the gasket on which, that is, in principle, that is, all these similar structures that are put on the block, well, not only on the block, they're on the head, and it is the oil pressure that is transmitted through them, that is, the main line goes. In principle, there are no problems with them, they do not flow, everything is fine. But this is where the problem is that they use a rubber gasket, but it's new, it's soft. And the old ones, but they, as usual, are getting old and are slowly starting to pass. Moreover, the surface here is also over time. First of all, it is not so crystal processed from the factory, and therefore they miss it. Therefore, in order to guarantee that there is no burden here, in principle, if you put it with a new gasket, it will not leak, but in order to guarantee that everything is fine here, I do all these things, that is, in addition to the fact that the gasket is laid here, I additionally lubricate them with a layer of sealant. Moreover, I drive a very thin layer of sealant into the groove itself and then from above. That is, the sealant will not be superfluous here, everything that is superfluous will go away, will be squeezed out, well, that is, it will leave from under the surface, that is, outside. If something gets inside, that is, it's not scary, but there are no channels, I mean, these here won't block. Well, here they are oiling it among themselves, that is, in principle, it is not necessary here. Here the gasket will seal them. That is, it is the main thing on the outside and seal it well. Well, that is, I just want to demonstrate a little. That is, I'm going to put it there now, it will partially squeeze out. I will remove the excess remnants of Autodov. Because here, anyway, it's always laid, well, it turns out a lot. That is, I'm only on the outside, that is, here I'm not laying between them, it's not necessary. There, even if there is something oozing literally there a drop a year between the channels, it is still there, no dirt will pass there. In general, of course, theoretically it is possible to fill this entire channel with a sealant, put it on and it will work. But this is theoretical. It's very cruel. Well, look, I'm going to take him there now. Well, you see, that is, I put a lot of sealant in there, you can say, but very little came out. That is. and even missed the top a little. That is, you see, even though I put a sealant there, that is, it was even possible to do more. And so the gasket is just, roughly speaking, so loosened, if I may say so in my own occurrence. Well, and also a little along the contour. I've put a lot of stuff in here now. Yes, we will clean up everything. I'll put it away now. I'm going to get out here now. Well, the main thing is to smear on the mostly outer part here. Well, I mean the outside of the software, relative to the gasket. That's it. Then something will get a little bit, if it gets inside, it, firstly, will not go anywhere, secondly, there is no problem there. Well, that is, if someone thinks or is afraid that it will come off and get somewhere in the channel, you cannot worry. Some Japanese, or rather almost all Korean, Japanese engines that are assembled there, they are based on sealant. Sometimes they come with O-rings, sometimes without. Well, that's it. The fastening design has guides like these knocks, that is, you can easily put it on and not be afraid, despite the fact that you accidentally got it there. I also repeat once again the surface, I didn't say, is degreased. Well, in order to apply a sealant. Now I'll bait him with one and show him. By the way, yes, the mounting bolts are these, the threads, like all the others, are what I collected on the cooling system, that is, I lubricate with copper grease. However, I say that there should be no corrosion and other unnecessary things on them. In principle, here, of course, on cast iron, since this is not a connected cooling system with a connected lubrication system, in principle, the bolts here probably never die, but I have seen many different cases where there were exceptions. That is, where it should not rust or oxidize, for some reason it rusted and oxidized. The most important thing is the top 4 bolts on which they sit, on which the gasket sits, because the bottom is just an additional mount. Therefore, it is delayed last. Well, there are certainly no special features here, but it will be more correct this way. Op everything. The bracket sits in place. Of course, I don't like the design itself, because, for example, when running in about 100 to 150 kilometers on any engine, I always recommend the owner to replace the oil filter. That is, it has no oil, nothing, just an oil filter. Because no matter how hard you try, no matter how you wash the engine, it's still the remains of the same liquor from the crankshaft, the pastes are different there, that's also transmission oil, some particles from the first minutes of work, it will still settle on the filter. Here, well, you just can't buy this filter in any store. And so, in principle, the design is like a construction and like this. Well, the filter with new rubber bands should already be installed immediately before launch, and I just baited the lid so that it was a set. The same goes for the intake manifold. It will be installed, it should be installed more precisely directly on the car, but since without it, it is plastic, bulky, that is, it is so big, already hanging here somewhere, that is, so big, and an oil dipstick is attached to it. Well, it's easier to install the engine without it, here, and then there is no difficulty in installing it on the car. This is the end of the video. I didn't put the valve cover on, by the way, I have a gasket on it here and everything else, so I didn't show it, Getsevskia. Well, there are sealing rings on the intake manifold. The fact is that the owner took it to paint beautifully, that is, we have to paint it there with powder paint. Well, I just don't have it yet, that is, I'm not putting it on, it's not such a big deal. In the future, I hope we will film the launch of this engine on a car, but I do not know when it will be, because bodywork is currently being carried out on the car, that is, welding, painting and well, that is, when it ends, maybe a month, 2 or 3, I will not say that. Well, that's all for now. The video, of course, turned out to be very long. And then I didn't show meticulously repairing the heads, as I usually did, and because I even showed these same heads in previous videos. There's an engine with a V-nose, and just an overview of the design of this head. That is, I just didn't focus on it in this video. As a result, I made a gap of 400 on all valves, both inlet and outlet. That's it, thank you for your attention.